Because
We are live. We are live, by the way. I wasn't. Yeah. I went live after you said the prayer. I apologize. I should have been more. Should have made it clear about what I was going to do. But let me just
no,
introduce
that's
the
fine.
channel. Let me just introduce the channel. Hello. This is the welcome to A's Philosophy YouTube channel. We are going to be having a conversation between me, Nathaniel, who is Taurus Necris Productions, and Daniel from Objective Ethics, who had a debate, I believe it was last night, on the 21st Century Minds Tristan Gabriel channel about whether society should use the Bible as a basis of morality. So go check out that debate. And there was a previous discussion that was being had about the nature of the mind, whether the mind can exist independently of the brain, or whether the brain can be scientifically demonstrated to basically explain everything that is observed as the mind. So the mind is basically purely and completely a product of the brain, or is there something more? Can the mind, can it be said or theoretically envisioned to exist independently of the brain? So these are really interesting questions, and these kinds of questions have been discussed by philosophers. Really, it's another one of those questions that goes way back, probably just as far back as the existence of God itself. What is the mind? What is consciousness? Where does it come from? Things like that. Does it persist after death, or is it extinguished at death? These are the kind of questions people have talked about for a long time. So we were kind of thinking maybe we would just kind of chat about that, or whatever else might be brought up along those
Well,
lines. So
um,
go ahead, Taurus, or go ahead, Nathaniel.
I have two things to say about that. One is that was a really interesting debate. I'm at the cross examination, and I'm excited to finally hear you get to talk about objective ethics, because that's all I've ever wanted to hear you talk about. And I think that the fact that it always becomes just like biblical criticism is something I'm kind of trying to figure out how to overcome. Because even like in my debate, every time I talk to an atheist, it just seems like it always becomes about biblical criticism. And I actually don't I love the Bible. I read it. It's a important part of my regular way of approaching life. But it's not like I don't approach it in the way that most Christians do, where it's like the foundation of my understanding. And I honestly think that most Christians don't actually live by the Bible, but they're just taught how to use it as like a reference, like a law book for what they are doing for other reasons. And then they just, kind of, but the point being, I think conversations can be a lot more fruitful just kind of sidestepping the Bible, because I don't think it's very precise or helpful to somebody outside of Christianity for understanding how Christianity really does work. So that's my opinion. But about that debate, and then the other
Daniel,
thing I wanted to say is, good.
well, I was going to say, like, so Daniel, since that's more like directed towards you, I will just let you respond as you see fit.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, do you want to finish your thought because I do have a response, but do you want to finish your thought, Nathan? Or sorry, Nathaniel?
Yeah, it's a totally separate thing, but let me throw it out there because I think it'll get us started on the subject we were trying to start on, which is, I don't think that the brain, from what I've seen talking to people about this subject, I don't think the brain as the like the epitome, or like the center of the soul, or the center of the mind. I think that's a very modern idea. I think most societies, from what I've been told and what I've heard from people who've researched it, never really associated the brain that way. They've always, like, apparently there's neurons in the stomach and in the heart, and I've been told that basically religions and whatnot, other religions and mysticism has always been focused on bringing the mind down to the center, to the heart, and that's been a very legitimate, where the actual body in its entirety has been associated with mind, and particularly other organs besides just the brain have always been associated with the mind. So I think that correlation is very modern. I think it comes out of Freud and particularly Freud's materialism. I have a lot to say about that. But go ahead and say your thing. But that'll get us started on that other topic.
Yeah, so a couple things there. So just real quick about the first part of that, I would agree with you a lot, and this is something I'm kind of come to realize here more recently after having been in the online circles, especially after having now engaged in some formal debates and stuff, and having had an opportunity to meet such a diverse group of people, to where before I was really interacting with people on the internet other than just stupid comment sections, which it's really hard to convey anything in a few sentences. You know what I mean? So now that I'm actually chatting with people, it's much more, I get a much better idea where people are coming from, and so on and so forth. And what, for me and my personality and stuff, the arguments that I would say I enjoy debating, or the topics I should say that I enjoy debating, are really not biblical per se, because at the end of the day, I am far more concerned with the behaviors of people than what they actually believe. You know what I mean? Like, if people want to be religious, I have absolutely no problem with that inherently. In fact, I would even go a step further and say that I truly do believe that religion is good for some people and necessary for some people. And I'm not saying you guys are like that in the way that I'm thinking of, where it's that extra level of accountability that certain people think they have. So I'm not going to steal when nobody's looking because God's watching me, kind of stuff. And I don't think you gentlemen seem to have character, you know what I mean, that I would attribute to you, irregardless of your religious beliefs. And maybe you attribute that to religion, I don't know, but I do think there are certain people out there that need that accountability, that extra level of accountability, to not be pieces of shit, you know. And there are other people who I know personally that have suffered tragic losses in their life, and religion ends up being something they can latch on to get through tough times. I know people that have recovered from drugs and alcohol, and they used religion to do it. So religion can have a lot of benefits to it, you know. So I don't want to just be out here just trashing religion or religious people. And it's so difficult to have a debate about anything religious, morality or society or anything at all that involves religion, without just dunking all over things that people actually believe, very, you know, hold very close to their heart. And that's very difficult for me, because I'm just not a cold, callous person, despite the fact that I speak in a very direct manner. And sometimes people misunderstand me as being, you know, maybe think I am an asshole. But the truth of the matter is I'm certainly not. I just believe that the best way to communicate with people is to be honest, and to be direct, and to try to be sympathetic as much as possible. But those three things don't always map well together. You know what I mean? So because of that, I really, after my last debate last night, I think I performed very well, to be honest with you. I normally am really hard on myself, and the improvement from the debate that I had on A's channel against the other gentleman, I can't even remember his name, but even though pretty much everybody says I won that debate because the gentleman just didn't defend his position at all, and he didn't refute anything that I said about objectivity versus subjective and all the other issues, and it was pointed out to him in the comment section. Overall, I didn't perform that great either. He just basically lost. It's not so much that I won; he just lost. And in this debate,
I think it got derailed. But the same thing I was saying, I think it just got off topic. It wasn't on
I
the
agree.
resolution
I agree.
slightly.
And in this debate last night, I was much more prepared. Now, I actually had been coached up quite a bit between the two debates by people who know what they're talking about and who engage in debates on big platforms. And so I was much better prepared. You could tell, I mean, the difference is literally night and day. So I'm really proud of my performance as far as that goes, my technical performance. And I feel like I did a really good job in that debate. But that took so much out of me, not just mentally in preparation, but emotionally too, believe it or not, because I actually felt kind of bad, because the person that I was debating against, I could see that the comments that he was making and the things that he believes were, in my opinion, so far to the extreme that they were harmful And not everyone who believes something that's, I think, is maybe not right or doesn't map onto what good ethics would look like doesn't necessarily mean they're actually a harmful person or having harmful behavior. But the guy I was debating last night, he just seemed so indoctrinated into certain beliefs that I just felt so bad for him, to be honest with you, as a human being, from one human being to the next. And it really struck a chord with me that when I have discussions about religion with people, this is really what it comes down to a lot of times. You know, now Nathaniel and A's, you guys have been very, very gracious to, I think, take a minute to understand where I'm coming from. So you guys don't, at least you don't give me the impression that you guys get offended when I ask questions or when I push back on things. Now, maybe it's just because you guys have really thick skin and you just have that much character and fortitude, or it might be the fact that you recognize that I'm really not trying to just dunk all over what you guys think is important, you know. But whatever the case may be, I would prefer moving forward to do more debates about things like morality and objective ethics
Mhm.
and defending my own positions, as opposed to making it my values versus Christian values or that kind of thing, to where I can avoid getting into the biblical stuff. I would also like to get it more into philosophy and things of this nature. I just had a fascinating discussion. One of the gentlemen who actually left a comment in that debate at the end, he runs a channel called The Discussion. Right now it's a small channel, but he is a deep thinker. And I'm telling you, man, this guy, he tackles the tough topics. And we just had a discussion on his channel a week or so ago about consciousness. And it was fascinating. So I'd like to get into more of this kind of a field or genre and try to see if I can step out from the some of this, you know, specifically biblical stuff in particular, and because of what I just mentioned. So I'll just say that before we get into what you said about the mind, and let's see what Ace has to say about this.
I'm actually just enjoying the back and forth between you two. It seems like you two are doing a good job of kind of, having a dialogue that's moving in a productive direction. So, yeah, I will say I did. I was unable to watch, but I guess I'll just make a couple of comments, even though I just said what I just said. I did watch the. I was not. Oh, let me. Okay, I did not. I was not able to watch the debate live, except I did arrive at the very end with like 5 minutes of Q&A. So today I went back and I watched the opening statements and I watched the rebuttals. So I have not yet seen anything beyond that, essentially. And I will say you did come across Objective as more prepared, and your arguments were more streamlined and targeted and just more clear, I would say. Not obviously, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with everything you said. I'm just saying your presentation was more refined. I think it was very apparent. I think you did a better job, like you said, from a more technical aspect. Again, there are things you said that I don't agree with, but it did appear to me that you had done a little more preparation and were kind of had entered with a game plan. That the other guy, I think his name was Matthew. Um, he is more of a persuasion that. See, it really, I don't really personally worry about defending the Bible.
Mhm.
I really more worry about defending Christ. And now a lot of people say, well, it's the same thing. I can understand that perspective, and I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong. But for me, the foundation of my belief is that, basically Christ came to give the ultimate revelation from God. Not that I know that with any sort of absolute certainty, but that's just kind of where I stand as far as my current position. So, defending certain interpretations of the Bible or giving up biblical inerrancy is not a big deal to me. But from his perspective, I would agree. I think he has a lot of things to think about. Um, he said a lot of things that I think he undermined his own position. Like when he tried to argue about certain questionable areas of ethics in the Bible, like stoning of adulterers and things like that, and some of the issues you brought up, Daniel. He talks about how this is a Bronze Age culture, and things were different back then, and it was better than the surrounding cultures, so that's why it should. Well, that's to me that kind of undermines the idea that it's not that this is supposed to be a book given to us by God. It's divine revelation. It's not like a relic from an ancient culture. So the fact that he had to take that route kind of shows me that he hadn't really figured this out. He doesn't really have this figured out, and you were able to basically exploit that, and it made you look, I would say, like the winner as far as I've seen so far. Even though I think that there are better answers to your questions and the points you brought up. And sometimes it's more about you're beating the guy you're debating, as opposed to did you actually establish some sort of ultimate truth. But again, your questions and the points you brought up weren't necessarily. I'm not dismissing the things you said, because they're good questions and they're good points. But I would like to see someone who maybe has thought about these things a little more deeply, and kind of has a better grasp of how to respond to certain skeptical talking points than the two opponents I've seen you face. But that's, I guess, kind of my thoughts. Go ahead, Nathan or Nathaniel. I've been talking
No,
for a while.
I think, can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. I was talking to you,
No,
mostly to you. So yeah, go ahead and respond.
yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I do want to be humble and admit that I hit a couple of softballs, underhand pitches out of the park as far as that goes. You know what I mean? And that's not so impressive as if I stepped up and debated somebody who really knew their stuff and had a solid position. Because Ray, when that debate, even though that was my first and only debate since I did it one time in high school on a debate team before I ended up going to a different high school, so I have literally no experience, and that was 100 years ago. And then, so the debate with Ray was really kind of my first go at a formal debate, in a lot of ways. And I was sorely underprepared. I didn't take any notes from his opening statement. So my cross-examination, there was just so disorganized and stuff. Whereas this time I was able to not only be organized with how I listened to what he was saying and addressed points that he was making specifically. But the other thing is, as you go on and watch the rest of that debate, you'll see that I literally had anticipated perfectly every single talking point he was going to make, which is crazy because he brought up so many random disjointed things, and I happened to have notes prepared for literally everything. Like, it's almost as if I was just sitting there watching him warm up with his notes and reading over his shoulder or something. I was literally, everything I did, nothing I prepared for didn't get brought up, which is so weird, because you'd think that if I planned on him saying 50 things, he might say 10 of them or something like that. But literally, like, I planned on him saying 10 different things and he said all 10 of them. And I had mountains of data points to basically refute what he was saying. And as you watch that debate, you'll see what I'm talking about. Like, so that preparation aspect was really, part of it was luck, obviously, that I picked, that I assumed the right things. The other part of it was preparation and being coached up by people who knew what they were talking about, who watched the first debate. Like Mark Reed, for example, he commented on that last debate. He just did a debate about evolution against Jim Bob. And I'm sure you guys know who Jim Bob is. I would assume so. He gets a lot of traction online. He's a tough debater. I think he's a moron, frankly, because he's a real jerk and he just basically gets into personal attacks with everybody. He doesn't really, he always takes the negative, so he doesn't have to ever prove anything. He just hand waves away all the evidence all the time, and then says, "Oh, cool story about evolution," or whatever. It's so funny. But he is a formidable debater because he knows his strengths and he sticks to it and he does it all the time. So Mark Reed, when he debated Jim Bob, Mark Reed actually, I would say, wiped the floor with that guy, and you don't see him get taken down like that. He also debated Andrew Wilson before, who's another tough guy that kind of does similar things. He kind of likes to powerhouse the room and take over with a lot of emotions and get everybody fired up, and so people like Mark Reed, who have a lot of experience, they really offered me a lot of insight and stuff, and I really appreciate that. Really paid off as far as that goes. But you're absolutely right. It was two people that I was debating. They were sorely underprepared. The guy I debated last night, he literally conceded the debate to me. I don't think he realizes it, but the whole premise of my argument was based on the fact that the Bible is subject to so much interpretation that any element of truth or foundational truth is basically irrelevant because it hasn't been immune to being abused and mistranslated and you know what I mean? And all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And by the end of the debate, he actually admitted this himself. So one of my strategies was to basically not dishonestly by any stretch of the imagination, but to basically throw some distractions out there to see if he'll take the bait and get caught up in arguing about things that help my case but have nothing to do with bolstering his case. And I feel like I did that it was a great strategy. So yeah, I agree with everything you said, on both fronts there.
Yeah, I just
Debate tactics is really
go,
interesting.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Nathaniel.
I mean, like
Yeah,
if you approach debate soberly, which is funny, but like I did debate a little bit in high school and just 1 year of it, and that was tough because everybody was prepared, you know. But I did really well, uh, and it does end up being about tactics. It's kind of interesting because I'm in that Discord server, and I don't want to make a big deal out of myself and stuff like that. But I saw they were doing debates, and I said, well, I could probably do that. And I watched some of the debates just because I know people know more things than I do, and it just was kind of rough watching the Christians just constantly lose. There were a couple of ones that did win, and it was usually because there were more precise tradition, which is interesting. But I think like you could probably track like stages of evolution as you get better at debate. That there's this erroneous assumption that because you are right, you'll win a debate, and there's so many things like for one thing, most of debate is won in defining the resolution and defining the terms of the resolution. It's like warfare. If you pick the battlefield, you've got the best chance of winning. You if you understand what you're going into, the more accurately you're going into it. Um, so that is really interesting, and I don't think there's anything wrong in. I mean, I get nervous sometimes how much I might be an accessory in blasphemy because I don't. It's a very serious sin, In the Ten Commandments, it's above murder, theft, um, which is interesting. Um, so I kind of start to get uncomfortable if things devolve into just making fun of God. But but besides that, I don't think there's anything. I can see God's purposes in testing people's faith, especially if people are going out in public and encountering other people because of the pride that could be inherent in that. It's kind of like Tom's voice voice group in that Discord. It's called Faith Breakers, and I wandered in there one time to listen before I knew him, and I just thought it was great that they were sitting there testing people's faith, and it really strengthens people's faith because the Christianity in America, and it's kind of bothersome to me as somebody who grew up essentially atheist and then became agnostic and then became Christian, became conservative, and then stopped being conservative and became Roman Catholic. And, I've gone through a very complex intellectual development on theology, philosophy, politics, economics, everything. And it's frustrating that Christianity in America is very skin deep and shallow. And there's a reason for that. It's because basically America, its whole existence as far as the United States, comes from the English colonies, which were founded during the English Civil Wars, where everybody was killing each other over Christian principles that they disagreed on. And the solution to that came about was essentially to stop talking about the deep disagreements. And so America is predicated on that
well,
idea that you don't
I
talk
just
about religion, you don't talk about politics.
I think there are a lot of quotes from the founders talking about. You see Thomas Jefferson saying, "I would question everything, including the existence of God," or something along those lines. I just really think
Yeah.
that most people on Earth, religious and non-religious, don't think too deeply about things. They're kind of more in like knee-jerk reaction mode, and I just think that
Well, sure, but
most people
nothing.
don't like most people they don't have a lot of time in their lives, and I'm not for better or worse, they're trying. When you're young, most of your time is spent, either just entertaining yourself or trying to find, a girlfriend or a boyfriend if you're a girl, or whatever it is you're looking for. So you're not really getting, being really deeply philosophical is kind of nerdy. So it kind of doesn't help you do that. So most people spend most of the early portion of their life just not really caring about those deeper matters. And then I think a lot of people reach a certain point in their life where they start to think about those things, and they kind of are dibble dabbling here and there, and they kind of find something they like and they get emotionally attached to it. And thus they don't really change their minds from that. So I think that it's not necessarily a problem with America. I think it's more just a problem with human nature and how people's lives unfold that results in people not having the time to really investigate things very deeply beyond a surface level.
Well, I'd push back on that in two ways. One is, yes, I agree with you, and I think that, in fact, that's my whole brand and what I'm trying to accomplish. I think that people don't have enough time because of the way usury affects economics and steals people's time before they're even born. So we all have to work very hard to generate thousands of dollars a month to pay our bills, which is an insane situation from a historical perspective. You have to generate paper money just to like have your basic necessities. And then, so that's one thing. I do agree with that, but and I do agree that that's the general fact about people too. That it's a small percentage of people that actually spend time thinking about these things and are in purpose by God to dive in deep with some like really abstract concepts. But I also don't think salvation is there either. I don't think that just the intellect learning, for instance, that Jesus Christ is Savior, and just the intellect's assent to that. I don't think that is what gets you to heaven. I think it's part of it. But you don't have to know that much in order to get to heaven. There are some people that need to know a lot because their intellect does act very, very intensely all the time, and so they have to deal with the nuances, that kind of thing. But what we're talking about, or at least what I was talking about, and you might modify your opinion in this case, is I was talking about people who are publicly going and defending the faith, that the people in charge of the faith and of Christian, what Christianity is, people who represent it in America are very shallow, by and large. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are actually supposed to be thinking about these things in depth and don't, because of marketing and a thousand other things. But basically, that's the culture, and I deal with it in the Catholic Church a lot. A lot of people complain about the Catholic Church. It's a heresy called Americanism.
There is a couple of really. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting points that were brought up here, and I would actually agree with a lot of things, but also push back as well in my own way. So, as a skeptic, as an agnostic, I'm in kind of a unique position because I'm as an agnostic, a full agnostic, and somebody who actually understands what agnosticism actually is. There are claims that I don't really even care to address. I don't mind dealing with the philosophical arguments of something like the Kalam cosmological argument or something like that. But at the end of the day, whether or not a God exists, I find to be a kind of a meaningless proposition up until the point to where you start, bringing in, okay, what are we doing? How is this affecting our lives? Are we going to vote because of this? How do we treat people because, so on and so forth? That becomes meaningful. But the proposition about a God or a deity or something like that, to me, is not nearly as interesting as I would spend more time investigating things like consciousness, universal consciousness, panpsychism or panenpsychism. Things of this nature, I think, are a little bit more intriguing just on a scientific and philosophical level. But as far as overall concepts about God, just if it's something that exists outside time and space, or if there is a prime mover or things of that nature, at the end of the day, to me, I'm not going to lose any sleep over the right or wrong answer to something like that. But what I do find being a skeptic, that I'm sitting there on both sides watching the atheists, in particular the hard atheists versus the theists, and the theists get dunked on so hard more often than not, just based on the fact of exactly what A's was talking about, is that they are sorely unprepared to defend the talking points that they're using. And that's really, you can totally tell that they're literally like essentially reading off of a script. And even though they don't have a physical piece of paper in front of them, they're just parroting things that they've heard. They've done zero research into the counter arguments, and this is on the average. Not every single theist is like this. Obviously, there are people who take it very seriously and very intelligent, very good at arguing their points. But for the most part, what I see on average are people are just sorely unprepared to defend their positions. I see this, like, for example, the global flood. So this is something that I do engage with because there's so much science, so much data points and everything else, evidence that we can use to address a topic like that. When I see people talking about, oh, you can't have an ice age without a global flood, it's like this person is so detached from reality at this point. They literally have no idea the physics behind what they're talking about. They don't understand anything that they're talking about, frankly. They're just literally saying things. I've heard people say you can't get round rocks if you don't have a global flood. It's just insane things like this that they make no sense at all if you really understand the world that we live in. Now, people can believe in a flood narrative if they want to claim miracles and miraculous intervention from physics and things like that. That's a whole different, fine. That's your out right there. But as soon as people start making claims about round rocks and ice ages and all this other stuff, that it's like, wait a minute, now you're just taking this too far. The same thing with the arguments from philosophy. I get into so many discussions with theists, and they want to, it even happened in my debate last night, that he thought he was going to have a gotcha moment by running to hard solipsism. And he's doing this, Christians, or not just Christians, theists do this because they don't understand that inserting a God into the equation does not get you out of hard solipsism. You're literally just hand waving away the problem and assuming there's a grounding there, but they fail to understand that even if there is a God, even if that God did create knowledge and everything else, at the end of the day, the hard solipsism problem is still there because we have to rely on our own intellect, our own reasoning to even identify that what this God is telling us is true or just a fairy tale. Even if we say God can do it for us and we just grant that God can make it happen, we're just hand waving away hard solipsism. We're not solving anything. They're in the same boat. The theists are in the same exact philosophical dilemma that non-theists are. And theists don't realize that because they don't really think about what they're actually saying. It sounds so powerful and it sounds so good to hear a skeptic say, well, yeah, I am basically stuck in this loop of relying on my own reasoning for determining my own reasoning. And that is, in fact, a loop. It's circular reasoning. And they're right about that. What they fail to see is they're stuck in the same loop. They just don't realize it. And this is just because of, like what Abe was saying, they just don't think about the arguments all the way through. One of the reasons I really like talking with A's, in fact, is because you are a very thoughtful, intellectual person, and you have clearly put a lot of work into researching different things and thinking about your position and things. So when I talk to you, we've had some really great conversations that didn't involve the Bible whatsoever. We talked about eternity of the soul and how sin is it, all these different concepts that are removed from the epistemology and the hermeneutics of the Bible, and it's really more about how does A's philosophy, what's his actual quote-unquote worldview now? You know what I mean? And so that's such a rare thing. So just to put that out there, sorry.
Would you help me? You might have explained. I just wanted to clarify. You might have explained that. I might have gotten distracted by comments right when you did. But what is hard solipsism?
So hard solipsism is essentially, the simplest way to put it is that we could just be brains in a vat, for example, or we could be living in the Matrix, and we would have no way of actually knowing that we're not. We have no way of actually knowing, because everything that we take in, all the information that we take in, we process through our brain, including pain, observation, everything like this, right? And so therefore, you cannot use your own reasoning to determine that what you are reasoning is true or false. That's a really dumbed down version of it. Does that help kind of lay it out for you?
No, it's interesting. I might need some examples, but yeah, no, I just need to be in the ballpark. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say in response to what Objective was saying that this is why I do talk about a field of philosophy called epistemology so much. A lot of Christians root their epistemology, they ground it in the Bible. And I actually don't do that. And I think that, and I don't know what, I don't know if I could put a percentage on it, but I might go so far as to say that at least maybe 80-90% of Christians are taught to think that the Bible is basically the ultimate source of truth. And something I try to do on my channel is let them know that actually all the Bible can do, even if we assume it is inerrant, is point to a truth beyond itself using words, which can be misinterpreted, which is something we obviously see happening all the time. So the only real grounding, or the ultimate source of epistemological knowledge itself, is the truth itself, which is reality. And we gain knowledge of reality through our senses. So rational empiricism is the strongest, as far as I've been able to ascertain, the best methodology for determining and establishing truth and knowledge that we have. And divine revelation, I would say divine revelation is something that can aid us, because here's my basic framework. There's the perceptible realm, which is the universe in which we live, and then there's the imperceptible realm, which is basically where God, the angels, and all the souls go when they die and things like that. And the mind and the soul are pretty much the same thing in my view. And so there's parts of reality that we can't observe directly with our senses. Just they exist right now, but we can't perceive them. Just like a worm can't perceive the sun. The sun coexists with the worm, but the worm really doesn't know it exists because it, first of all, can't conceive it of a sun, and it can't see it, can't sense it, can't basically it's limited in its sense perceptions. It might be able to sense its effects, but not the sun itself. So it would have a hard time conceptualizing the sun, if it could conceptualize the sun at all. So my viewpoint is that divine revelation can aid us in understanding the things that we can't perceive. But for the things that we can perceive, we should use a scientific method, which is basically just observing reality through our senses. So a lot of Christians resist that and think I'm a heretic for suggesting that, but I don't see any better way to do it. So I'm not really concerned about their opinion. Go ahead.
Well, Nathaniel,
I want to just touch on that, because this actually ties into something I wanted to mention to you specifically before I forget, because being a Catholic, and this ties directly into what Aze was saying. So I have been working on formalizing an official or a formal argument for my stance on objective ethics, right? And I've been creating a syllogism, and I've been very fortunate to have very intelligent, highly educated PhDs and authors of books who have volunteered their time to help me out with this, right? And it's been really educational for me. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. One of the gentlemen who I've been speaking with is a PhD philosopher, Dr. Derek McAllister, who is a Catholic himself. And he actually went on to, I saw him right after I had met him. He went on to Justin's channel, Deconstruction Zone. Now, I know Aze knows Justin. Are you familiar, Nathaniel, with Justin from Deconstruction Zone?
You mentioned him to me. That's all. I haven't.
He is literally running circles around not just Christians but theists all day long. Now he's got a master's in divinity. He is extremely intelligent, and Aze can verify what I'm telling you. He is literally cooking Christians constantly. I mean, he knows his Bible. He knows the original languages, so nobody can pull anything on him. You know what I mean? And Dr. Derek McAllister went on to his show and attempted to spin the ontological argument, and he got totally swatted down. And he got I hate to say it because Dr. McAllister is a really nice guy and he's been very helpful to me, but he got absolutely roasted, just like everybody else who calls Justin's show. I mean, Justin has got to be like the Charlie Zellinger of debate, except that he always does win, as opposed to Charlie Zelenoff, his name is, who never wins. But Justin's got to be like 1,000-0 almost, pretty much. He's extremely good at what he does. And Dr. McAllister was in way over his head. And I don't think he realized that. I think he thought because he knows philosophy and because he did go to seminary, he thought he would be able to get in there and spar with Justin. But Justin just roasted him like everybody else. But so I was talking to Dr. McAllister a few days ago to talk about my syllogism. And somehow that debate that he had with Justin came up. I didn't bring it up, but I was just there talking to McAllister when it came up. And Dr. McAllister that's what it was. He had another Catholic who had jumped into his live, and they were talking amongst each other, and I was just in the chat room, right, listening to it. And the two Catholics were talking about Justin and about how he's cooking all these Christians, and about how Dr. McAllister brought up that he was a little bit embarrassed, actually, because apparently, which is unfortunate, but he's getting trolled by atheists every now and again, because every day Justin goes live, he's got a couple thousand people watching him live every single time, and he does it 5 days a week. He's got a huge audience. And so that's a lot of exposure to go in and get embarrassed, And something that Dr. McAllister said that had not occurred to me for some reason, and I think that it's a fair point that he brought up. It sounds like a coping mechanism or a cop-out, but I actually think there's a legitimate argument, and it does tie into what A's was talking about here, and it does tie into you being a Catholic as well, so I kind of wanted to run this by you guys. Dr. McAllister said that the problem with having a debate like that is that not only does this apply to Justin, but this applies to, I would say, 90% of the atheists, excuse me, gentlemen, and agnostics, I got the hiccups, who debate against theists. We're debating against a biblical literalist perspective where every single word means exactly what it means. And Justin's famous for saying, oh, words don't mean words. He allows no room for interpretation. He allows no room for what's the word I'm looking for? Like not manipulating the text isn't fair to say, but
or whatever.
Navigating with the text, you know what I mean? Where I'm not coming up with the right word for some reason. I'm a little tired. I'm a little brain dead from all that debating last night, to be honest with you. I'm kind of out of it.
Yeah.
But
that's how it does, yeah.
Navigating, that's the word. I'm navigating the text and harmonizing text and things like this, right? And in the Catholic tradition, all of the legwork has already been done for you guys because it comes from a very strong foundation when you have the early church fathers who happen to be philosophers like St. Thomas Aquinas, Irenaeus, and things of this nature, right? You got Origen, you got all these different really intelligent philosophers who set a lot of groundwork, who already wrestled with problems like, contradictions and interpretations and wait a minute, it technically isn't going to work. So they've already addressed. So the Catholic Church now has all their arguments. You and I had a couple of interesting conversations about what I see as clear contradictions. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't accept your response as being reasonable to me in my perspective of how I'm reading those particular contradictions. However, You have a very formal, organized, not completely. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like when I'm listening to you explain this to harmonize this contradiction, right? To me, it doesn't make sense why somebody would go to the kind of effort to look for some reason to make this make sense instead of simply reading what to me seems to be obviously in front of my face. But that doesn't mean I'm right. You know what I mean? I fully admit that. I could be missing the whole point of everything. I could be missing the bigger picture. And when Dr. McAllister was saying that the Catholic Church takes a lot of things allegorically, because they've already recognized the literal contradiction, the literal problems, if you're too literal, whereas Justin and the atheists and stuff are attacking these things. It's got to be word for word what it says, and it's got to mean literally what it says, and you have to, you know what I mean? And so you have an impasse here, where it might seem like Justin and all these other people are really cooking all these theists, but maybe the skeptics aren't giving the theists enough credit or giving the church fathers and the really intelligent philosophers enough credit for actually maybe having a valid point. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And it ties into what A's was talking about with the interpretation of the Bible, is that maybe there are interpretations or maybe there are ways to navigate the text that you don't have to get necessarily pinned to the ground just because, quote unquote, words mean words. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do want to
Yeah,
respond to that, but I also, so Nathaniel, why don't you respond to that, and then I'll respond to that, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to be away for 2 minutes or so at least, so go ahead, Nathaniel.
yeah. Well, there's a lot that has been written and a lot that's going on, and in the church, there's a lot that's going on in the Bible, which I think people kind of breeze through that. It's like I remember I was a Protestant on YouTube, uh, arguing with people about the Bible, and I said to myself, because that seemed to be the way to form your religion in America, as you argue, which I think is a Jewish tradition. Um, and I remember getting very angry with them, and I was like, "It seems like you guys don't even read this book." Because when I read this book, this is not, I'm a writer. I like literature. When I read the Bible the first time, and generally this is how I've always read the Bible. I read it from beginning to end, um, and that's just how I read it. That's how I'm reading it right now. I'm in the prophets right now, and it does not come across to me as simple or any of these things people say. It's a love letter to earth or to men from God. It's an instruction for life. None of those things. I mean, the majority of the Bible seems to me to be a history, and and it's actually very fascinating how it's described. So, like, there's a lot of things about. It's like when I read in history that you know these atrocities take place, that doesn't compute to, okay, this person who wrote this book is advocating for these atrocities. They're just reporting on it. Now you can discern from them how they feel about it. I think a lot of things like what you brought up with slavery, with women being submissive to their husbands and all those kinds of things. I think that you can take a plain reading and you'd say, well, it does seem like God, all of his people believe women should be submissive to their husbands. It does seem like in God's scheme for the world, at least under sin, slavery is inextricable. It's there. It doesn't go away, and it's just like a fact to be dealt with. There's no more. There's no moral condemnation. I don't. I do see that, and so you can reach those conclusions, but um, it's just a very complex book, and I think all those topics take a lot more, especially if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't believe in it, who doesn't read this book and say, yeah, this is definitely true. It's just a complicated conversation, and it's better had with specifics of the book. Like I think slavery is well and good. I consider myself currently a slave in a lot of ways, and I know my people were slaves. The Irish were worse slaves here in America. They were treated worse than the blacks were. That's where the term redneck comes from. So, but and then also the Catholic Church. I don't know this man, but I have been kind of ancillary to uh, people in the Catholic Church promoting the young Earth creationist perspective and a very literalist perspective, and they say that the Church Fathers and all them, with the exception of Origen, who was a heretic, um, that anytime you have an allegorical meaning, it builds upon a literal meaning. You can't. The allegory is not that this thing was said. It's there are some things in the Bible where this is a metaphor, and that's usually pretty obvious, but it's the fact that this thing happened. So Noah put a door in the side of the ark. He literally did that. And so allegorically, the reason why God had him do that is because it was partly because it was connected to the wound in Christ's side on the cross. So that's how we view the allegorical meaning of it. But in the Catholic Church right now, a lot of things are obscured, and a lot of teaching that the Catholic Church has held immemorial is abandoned rather than explained, rather than owned up to, in order to basically appeal to people who have very genuine problems with the Bible. And and I don't. I'm not like enemies, and that's the majority of Catholic intellectuals. They believe in evolution and theistic evolutionist kind of thing. You know, people like Teilhard, de Chardin, and whatnot, who have laid out some ways to try to reconcile the Bible with evolution. And I respect the intellectual capacity that goes into coming up with those things. You know, when I first read the Bible, I had no reason to disbelieve in evolution. So I understand all that, but I think it ends up not working because, and that's just one example. There's many other things like that where things in the Bible are just obscured, like the slavery topic, which I would love to talk about. I mean, it's very interesting to me, but basically, it doesn't end up working because, like, look at yourself. You know, if we just throw out the creationism that's so apparent in the beginning of the Bible, he did this on this day, he did this on that day. It's just so straightforward. It's hard to say that is anything but literal. And we have church fathers and whatnot. We have popes, tons of them talking about the literal meaning there and how important it is that it's written like a history. It's not written like an allegory, as in the Song of Solomon's, which is clearly an allegory. When you throw those things out and try to reconcile with the intellectual people that are outside the church, you don't end up making friends. They just go on to other questions. Okay, so you embrace evolution. Well, why does your God not condemn slavery then? Because if he's willing to give to Moses this idea of creation that's wrong because he wants to say something allegorical to Moses, but it's not true in a literal way, well, why is he not willing to condemn slavery then, if he's God? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just pointless to do that. It's better just to own up to what's in there. But that's been going on also. That's been going on for at least, Pope Pius X was really famous for fighting against that in 1900. And nowadays it's a different situation because you have generations where people have just grown up learning a certain way of approaching the Bible, their religion, their faith. And it's a different situation now where people don't believe things because it's a new topic to figure out. They believe things because there's so much information, they don't have enough time, and they just haven't looked into it. Or if they did look into it, they only looked into so much of it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? I didn't mean to go off topic too much.
Well, I will say something. When you speak for so much time, it's kind of hard for people to address everything you're saying. So I don't know.
Right.
Maybe
Sorry.
it's. I don't think there's either one of us can. Even if we spend the next 2 hours, we probably just wouldn't be able to like address half of the things you just mentioned. So I don't know. That's just something
Yeah.
to think
Well, I mean, it's worth taking the time. That's the thing.
about. No,
So
it is.
pick
No,
one and we'll go into it.
I appreciate.
We're
what you do.
friends. We got time.
No, we do. Actually, we kind of don't because I don't have a lot of time tonight. We'll see how long this goes, but
I mean,
no,
like
that's
in
fine.
the future.
But you were the thing is, as long as you're saying things that are relevant, it's fine. Like some people want to come in here and ramble about nonsense, but everything you said was relevant, so that's good. I do kind of want to chime in at this point, though, and unfortunately, Nathaniel, I'm going to direct more of my attention to the things that Daniel was saying.
Sure.
Because I was originally responding to him. And I'll start off by saying this. I actually have had a lengthy discussion with Justin from Deconstruction Zone, not on his channel, but on the line. I actually think it was the first time that he hosted the line. And it was a really interesting conversation. I will admit, you're right. He's one of the best I don't know what you would want to call like anti-apologists, anti-Christian apologists that has surfaced in recent times. I actually think he's probably better than like a lot of the originals like Matt Dillahunty, just because Matt Dillahunty gets a lot of views just for being extremely emotional and like hanging up on people and yelling at them and cussing them out. Whereas Justin really does seem to more like be zoned in on discussing the issues themselves and not getting super emotional about it. I do think Justin has some faults and occasionally will kind of use basically rhetoric to establish his point. So I'll start with that. But let me also say, you're going to how when you're debunking the Bible and how it's kind of easy to do that at a certain level. And let me drop back a little bit. When it comes to theism in general, one thing that I constantly, it's almost a meme as how what theists will go, you know, you don't, there are thousands of gods in history and you only believe in one, to Christians. So just ask yourself why you don't believe all the other gods, and then you will understand why I don't believe in your God. And I think there's some merit to that. I think that atheists, or not even necessarily atheists, but just basically human progress, has shown that, yes, there are no gods living in the cloud throwing down lightning bolts. There's not like men in chariots dragging the sun around. Poseidon doesn't live in the ocean and have a bunch of like fish swimming around him at his command. Okay. Those gods don't exist, but these are, of course, characters of more philosophical kind conceptualizations of God, and they kind of run off of these low hanging fruit arguments that they feel like they've won when it comes to theism. Where okay, yeah, certain conceptualizations of God are wrong, but what about just a general like God conceived of as a ground of being, who is conscious and aware, a conscious creator of the universe? Nothing that we've observed in science has refuted that concept of God, because the entire universe would be the creation of that God. The scientific laws are the product of that God. So we are merely observing the creation of God. Likewise, with the Bible, it's very easy to run circles around people who hold certain ideas about the Bible. Unfortunately, I think people who hold very literalistic views of the Bible are easy to refute. I think that full preterists have a lot of problems because they clearly just have to make a whole bunch of stuff up to get their doctrine. And it has nothing to do with the words themselves. They just, so these people have, but nevertheless, they believe in inerrancy. So they believe in inerrancy, and yet nothing they believe actually comes from the Bible itself. It comes from their interpretations of the Bible. So yes, I will acknowledge that atheists have established that some approaches to the Bible are not viable. Okay, but have you actually refuted the Bible? The thing about it is that the Bible does engage in a lot of symbolism. One of the things I discussed with Justin is, he likes to harp on how Jesus didn't fulfill any of the prophecies in the Old Testament. Well, sure, you're right. If we're going to take the idea that a prophecy that has to be fulfilled in a one-to-one correlation with a prophecy being made, I'm looking at the chat right now just to make sure I'm not ignoring anyone. Sorry if I'm ignoring. I'm kind of just on the panel right now. For anyone who's in the chat, I'm not sure if I'm.
They're having their own discussion in there.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't ignoring anything. Yeah, okay. So if you take the prophecies about Christ in the Old Testament and apply them in a very literalistic fashion to Jesus Christ, yeah, he failed a lot of them. He didn't defeat the Romans, and he wasn't this warrior king who smashed the Jewish enemies and established the Davidic kingdom again. But again, that's basing your idea on the idea that prophecies are supposed to be fulfilled literally, which even in the Old Testament is shown to be not true. Prophecies are very symbolic. They're not necessarily meant to symbolize things that actually happen in physical reality. They could have a heavenly dimension to them. And the earthly enemies could represent spiritual battles that each of us fights within. So that would be the battle against sin is the ultimate battle that we're all fighting. So in that time frame, that could be represented by the Romans. But if a prophecy was today, it might be represented by, I don't know. I don't want to name anyone specific. I don't want to offend anybody. But there might be some nefarious group out there that might be represented by a prophecy. Said you will defeat this enemy, and then that time frame comes along, and people are like, wait, they're still out there. They're still doing their thing. Well, the point is the prophecy isn't meant to be literal. It's supposed to represent spiritual battles that are taken. So I've already spoken so long that I don't want to go on further. I have a lot more to say, but maybe you can just respond to what I've already said. Whoever, let's go with Daniel and then Nathaniel.
Well, I think that we're all, well, I don't know, I shouldn't say this. It seems like we're all in somewhat of an agreement here in that the approach that people are taking to defend the Bible can be inherently problematic. And I certainly agree with that. And one of the things that I'm trying to do to be more gracious with the people that I interact with is to try to really consider what they're saying. Because for me, my knee-jerk reaction is when somebody says, oh, well, you have to reinterpret the text to basically harmonize it. And now they're not saying it in those specific words, obviously, but that's what I'm hearing. And that's what I'm seeing a lot, what it seems to me that's happening. So somebody's like, well, I'll give you an example. So in the two Genesis stories, they actually contradict each other if you read them literally, right? You get two specific events, creation events. They're listed in specific order and for a specific purpose. And they don't match up. The order of events just don't match up. So a lot of responses that I get from theists is, well, one of these, the second creation story narrative is supposed to just be kind of a general summary. It's not meant to be read like a day to day. And that sounds great. Okay, so you found a way to harmonize that. But if you actually read carefully, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because the second creation narrative does have a specific order of events. And you know this because not only the wording, and I hate to say words mean words, but the words are actually relevant. If words don't have any objective meaning, objective, that's not a good word to use, but you know what I mean? If they don't have any meaning per se, then we could just say anything we want, and anything could mean anything. So if you read the words and then, it indicates a specific order. Plus, if you actually read what's being written, God did not create, it's not like he said, well, Adam and Eve were walking around the earth because God wanted to have Adam and Eve on the earth. And then, they're managing the garden, and God had created this garden on the planet. He didn't do it out of order in some kind of summary. The planet was created first. The garden was created next. You can't have a garden without a planet. And then the garden needed somebody to work the soil, right? To work the garden. So then here comes Adam. Adam didn't have a partner. So it lists these things in a chronological order, even though it doesn't say day number 1, day number 2, it doesn't need to. It still gives you that chronological order. So this to me is a clear contradiction.
Which one?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Doesn't say day 1, day 2. Which contradiction are you doing? Let's
so in the first narrative, it literally lists day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way through day 6, and then the 7th day God rests. And we know that these are set up as 24-hour periods because it tells you from the beginning that the sun rose and the sun set the first day. So now we know we're dealing with 6 24-hour periods, right? In the second narrative, it doesn't say. Yeah, in the second narrative, it doesn't say day 1, day 2, day 3. What it does is it just literally goes over the events and lists them in the order of the events. And then this happened, and then this happened. But it doesn't just tell you, and then this happened. It tells you why it's happening. God created Adam because he needed someone to tend to the garden. So it's very specifically telling you and clearly telling you why these things are happening, as well as the order these things are happening in, right? So in the first narrative, God creates. So in the first narrative, God creates. Now I don't have this memorized, but in the first narrative, I believe God creates Adam after he creates the animals and after he creates the plants and stuff. In the second narrative, God creates Adam, or I might have this backwards. In one, he creates the plants and animals first, before man, and in the second one, he creates Adam after he creates the plants and animals. And in the second one, he says, I need to bring a partner. I need to see if Adam needs a helper. So in the first narrative, he creates Adam and Eve on the 6th day, right? And he creates them together. He creates Adam and then he creates Eve. In the second narrative, he creates Adam, then he creates the animals, and then he brings all the animals to Adam to see if he'll be a suitable partner for him. And then God realizes that none of these animals are going to be a good partner for Adam, so then he creates Eve. So you get a completely different order of events and a purpose for the events between the two narratives. And the only way it could be harmonized is if you say, well, you can't read this literally. You have to just assume that this is just an overall kind of an overview of creation. And it just doesn't make sense to me logically. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible but it doesn't make any sense if you actually read carefully what's being said. So, and I'm not trying to harp on the Bible here. I'm just pointing out a particular example of, when I hear people harmonizing these texts and saying, well, this is a solution I've come up with to this apparent quote unquote contradiction. But then I look at their solution, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, why would you bend over backwards or pretzel yourself, as it's said in other circles, to come up with this crazy story that doesn't even really line up with the way the text is written? The other issue I have is that when it comes to things that we don't have, so let me give an example. So in Daniel, for example, we have all the archaeological evidence for Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus, Belshazzar, all the way through this entire lineage, right? We have the archaeological evidence for what the family line is, for who these people were, why they were in power, when they were in power, what their titles and names were. All this stuff, we have more archaeological evidence for that particular period in history than we do about almost any other period in history, right? It's prevalent. We have tens of thousands of pieces of evidence for this period. And there isn't a single piece of evidence. There's not a single piece of evidence that says that Belshazzar was ever called the son of Nebuchadnezzar. There's nothing. We have no proof of that whatsoever. Daniel says that that's how it was. Daniel calls Belshazzar the son of Nebuchadnezzar. But we know for a fact, based on the empirical data, that Daniel was the son of Nabonidus. We also know how Nabonidus came to the throne in the first place. He wasn't related to Nebuchadnezzar. It was part of a coup that his grandfather actually took the throne from Nebuchadnezzar. So when I've heard Christians try to justify this mistake that Daniel made by saying, oh, well, Nebuchadnezzar was a throne name that Belshazzar was using. That's why he calls him the son of Nebuchadnezzar. But that doesn't make sense, because if you're going to look at a throne name throughout history, the throne name was attributed to the king that was recognized, the king that was honored, not to some just king that got overthrown in a coup. They're not going to keep his name as a throne. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Then other people have said, well, Belshazzar was actually related to Nebuchadnezzar through family ties. But the archaeological evidence that we have, which includes Belshazzar's family lineage that was written down by his mother, does not say a single thing. There's no ties whatsoever, and we have that evidence. So is it absolutely 100% impossible that Belshazzar didn't have a distant relative related to Nebuchadnezzar? No, it's not impossible, but people are hiding behind what's not impossible and ignoring the massive amounts of data that we have that lead us to a pretty simple conclusion that Daniel just got it wrong. You see what I'm saying? So again, I'm not saying it has to be 100% wrong.
And sorry to cut you off. I just want to ask you, some people in the chat look like they're disagreeing with what you're saying. Would it be cool if, like, for the next little bit here, we don't have much time left, to open it up and see if other people have some objections to the specific things you're claiming, or did you just want to continue?
Yeah, I mean, no, you can do whatever you want. I've literally heard all the arguments 100,000 times. I've got the list of the archaeological evidence I'm talking about, like the Nabonidus inscription, the stele, and all this. So I actually have references they can go look at themselves if they want to see where this information comes from. But I've had this argument a million times with people. I just had a debate against a Christian apologist who insisted that he could win a debate with me about archaeological evidence. He was unable, using Grok, and he was unable to produce a single piece of archaeological evidence to refute the claims that I was making. This is one of the claims. And yet he insists that he won that debate. Now, how do you win a debate about archaeological evidence without producing a single piece of archaeological evidence? You know what I mean? He's just convinced himself the Bible has to be true, and that's the only piece of evidence he has. But you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. That's completely circular. You know what I mean?
Would you, I just want to say about both these two things. The Nebuchadnezzar thing, I'm not an archaeologist. I have a good, brushing of, some of the historical things that went on to cause archaeology in that period to be researched. So that was stuff like that. But could you just send me that stuff? Because that seems like something
I can do that for you. And as I explained to Dirty Varmint,
I don't know talk about.
But the successor, he wasn't the successor of Nebuchadnezzar either. That's completely misunderstanding. Belshazzar was not the successor to Nebuchadnezzar. He was the successor to Nabonidus. Nabonidus was not the successor to Nebuchadnezzar either. Nabonidus' father took the throne from Nebuchadnezzar. So none of them were successors to Nebuchadnezzar whatsoever.
Let me ask you this.
So that one you.
I just want to ask this: could it possibly just mean somebody who ruled after Nebuchadnezzar? Like successor doesn't mean someone who like legally inherited it in a line of succession. It could mean somebody who just came after the person before him. Would that possibly resolve the issue if it was?
It's not impossible. The problem is it's highly unlikely. You have to provide some other instance that we can verify where that actually where a king was overthrown, right? A king without even a very good reputation. If you really understood what Nebuchadnezzar, why? Well, I wouldn't say that didn't have a good reputation. That's not fair. But he was overthrown, so he's now being seen as a weak individual who wasn't able to maintain his own throne. Why would anybody link themselves to a throne name? Because what you're talking about now is using Nebuchadnezzar as a throne name, and that just wasn't happening. There's no evidence that happened. Now, is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. But we have all the evidence that that's not what happened. So why would we accept that as a theory? It doesn't even make sense.
I do think that's something that I'd like to look at. The place where I'm not just like knee jerk throwing out.
I mean, to me, okay.
I want to talk about Eve though.
I do want to say it is possible that there is a historical error in the Bible or multiple historical errors in the Bible. There are differences in the numbers that are given in various census counts in the Bible and things like this, where in one place, so basically, they're the same in the Bible. It happens out, especially in the Old Testament. The same storyline is sometimes recounted twice, depending on where you're looking. Like there could be one storyline. The storyline could first appear in, let's say, 1 Samuel, and then the same storyline is recounted in Chronicles or something. I'm not just to be general. And occasionally there will be slight differences, not major differences, not something, but just slight differences in how they're specifically told in terms of the details. Okay, if you approach the Bible as it's basically a book written by God, that's a huge problem. But if you approach it as basically a historical document that was basically written down just like a Chinese accounting of their history, or a Greek recount or Roman accounting of the emperors or something like that, where a human scribe might potentially make a slight error at some point, and it gets recorded and transcribed, then it really isn't a problem for the overall message of the Bible, in my opinion. Now, a lot of Christians are going to disagree with that, but for me,
yeah, I disagree with it.
Okay, so yeah, but for me, the idea that there could be a real error in the Bible does not affect my faith. It doesn't make me not believe that there's a God. It doesn't mean that basically that portion would be incorrect, but everything else could be correct. Now, we lose certainty, absolutely. We if you question one thing, you lose certainty about everything else. But at the same time, just because there's an error doesn't mean the entire Bible is false or that it's a lie or anything like that. Not in my opinion, but other people might differ.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I mean, just because when people reprint the Bible, yeah, there's like a famous Devil's Bible where it like misquoted the Ten Commandments and stuff like that. The Latin Vulgate is the one that, in my understanding, the Catholic Church holds is inerrant. So that's a direct answer to that question. It's like, well, which Bible are we talking about? All that kind of stuff. The Latin Vulgate, what I've been told. But I've only ever heard of one. I've only ever heard of one error, if you want to call it that. I hesitate to call it that, obviously, but that has not been resolved to my satisfaction, and it is a very minor error having to do with a king's members. His lifespan, and I've not seen a satisfying explanation. But so I'm not afraid.
Which one is it?
I haven't encountered the. Say it again.
Which one is it?
It's a particular king that is recounted, like you said, I think Chronicles and then Samuel, something like that. We have different names too. There's like third Samuel. And I read it the first time. But it's a particular king where his lifespan and his reign is different in the two accounts. And I haven't
Well,
seen.
Can I
Let's do it
touch
this
on?
way.
Can I touch on
Yeah.
one thing? Because I just want to
talk about
reiterate what
Eve,
you're.
because that one's more
so-
significant to me.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's organize.
So with
Hold on.
with what A's was.
Before you go, I just want to lay out the order of how people are going to see. Daniel, take a couple minutes to respond to everything you've heard. Then Roy Chess joined. He'll have a couple minutes to speak, and then Jill joined. And so that's how we're going to go. Daniel, take a couple minutes, then Roy Chess, then Jill. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, no, you were. I just want to reiterate what you were absolutely right. As far as critical scholarship is concerned, the chronicler, as he's known, the author of Chronicles is what he's called, is notorious for changing, editing, redacting stories that were written previously, according to critical scholarship. Okay, so you get anything that he doesn't like. He could just be making mistakes, or two, there are things that don't seem like they're very copacetic, we'll just say that, and so they could be problematic passages or verses, so he makes slight alterations. A perfect example would be the story about the census. The original story about the census has God telling David to commence with the census, and then God gets upset with David about the census. The chronicler comes and rewrites that exact story, except that he decides that it's Satan who tells David to take the sentence. It's the same. Otherwise, it's the same exact story. And so the Chronicler is notorious for this. So he does it with things in Samuel. He does it with things in Kings, I believe. So it's Chronicles is the both first and second is a real problematic passage when it comes to contradictions and stuff like that. The other books, usually contradictions are found within the book itself, but the Chronicler is notorious for that, and that's just critical scholarship. People can take it how they want.
Tess, and then Jill, and then Mr. Self-Important.
Okay. Hello, guys. Thank you again for allowing me up. I just wanted to touch on a few things, mainly the Genesis argument. But real quick before I jump to that, King Tut, I believe King Tut is before the Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible. I think Nebuchadnezzar 2 is in the Bible, right? So King Tut predates him. And there's been another person after the death of King Tut that took the throne that was not blood related. So there were coups before that occurred, right, with Nebuchadnezzar. And if someone is a successor, that doesn't mean they immediately take office or take the title immediately. There's no timeline. I think that's what the person was saying, that it meant successor. That means somebody comes after that ruler or whatever.
Yeah, I meant predecessor. It's almost.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to argue that point, but that was just some technical things that it did happen before. The argument on Genesis, I believe you're partially right, but you miss. Number one, I have a problem when you say it's a contradiction. It's not a contradiction, right? It would be inconsistent. It wouldn't necessarily be a contradiction. And one reason why it's not a contradiction is because there are cases where there's at least one case where I can give you it's possible, right? So when you hear people talk about the Bible, what do they tell you about God and humans? That we were made in his image, right? You've heard that, right? Objective?
Yes, I have made that. I have heard that. Yes.
Yes, and you've heard that we are made in his image. What do you think that means as far as his image?
Oh, I have. I mean, myself, I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought. All I could do is cite to you what critical scholars have said about that, which would be the fact that it has to do with basically I've heard two different arguments. One, it has to do with the physical appearance of human beings, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, obviously. The other argument is that the nature of having a soul, things like that's what gives us God's image. The other thing I've heard is that we have ability to like love
Well, the soul would okay. So I don't know if you know this or not, but the soul is not just something. So the soul is not just. It's not like a body, right? The spirit is actually like a body. Like angels are spirits, and God is a spirit, right? You've heard of that, right? God is a spirit. So when it talks about let's make someone make them in our image, they're talking about spiritual beings, right? God is a spiritual being. Angels are a spiritual being. Human beings are spiritual beings, right? So if that's the case, right? If humans have a soul and we have a spirit, the first case of Genesis, the last few sentences, chapter 1, I think verse 27, 28, 29, or whatever, uh, it talks about God made man, male and female. God created them. In this particular case, it's not talking about God took them out of the dust of the ground as in chapter 2. It doesn't say that in chapter 1, right? Chapter 2, you get the physical body are created. In chapter 1, at the end, at the very end, before you get to chapter 2, God creates the spirit. So this would be not a contradiction. This would be consistent with the story in Genesis chapter 2, because he creates the body and blows the spirit into the body, and then man became a living soul. So there is no contradiction if you have that context. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say
Well,
two things.
hold on,
First of
hold on,
all, I
hold on,
didn't
hold on,
mention.
hold on, hold
Oh,
on.
go ahead.
This wasn't supposed to be a dialogue. It was supposed to be like kind of like make a case and then we move to the next person. So let's move to Jill. Let's just try to get some people's thoughts on this instead of because of how many people want to respond. It's not an easy way to do it, but I want everyone who's on the panel to have a chance to kind of speak his mind. So before we go into more of a dialogue, let's just try to make sure everyone's had a chance to speak. So let's go to Jill and then Mr. Self-Important. All right, so Jill, what do you have?
Mr. Self-Important, is that dirty?
It is dirty.
Yeah, I was on Ace's channel earlier.
Oh,
He changed my name.
oh yeah, yeah, he does that. Well, first and foremost, when it comes to critical scholarship, I call it liberal scholarship because I like to use that word because it describes basically their motive, or it's basically propaganda, most of it. Every 20 years, they come up, and I've been around to tell you that this is the case. They come up with this now with the advent of the internet. It's probably a lot. The intervals are probably a lot shorter, maybe every 2 to 3 years. But they come up with these so-called contradictions. All of them have been addressed thoroughly, debunked thoroughly. There are zero contradictions in the Bible. What we often, the trick is, and it is a trick, and that's why they're called liberal scholars, not critical. Because the critical thinkers are actually doing that. They're thinking critically about what is being said. What they'll do is they'll come in with a presupposition. So I'm coming in presupposing, for example, Genesis 1 is a carbon copy, and it was intended to be a carbon copy of Genesis 2, that they don't have intended purposes separate or independent of each other. And then when that is not the case, when we read the text, we say, aha, contradiction. That's the oldest trick in the book. And they've been doing this for decades. And I've been around long enough to tell you that that's the case. You can go all the way back to Elaine Pagel. You can go back to the Jesus Seminar in the 90s. It's the same rules. It's the same trick. And it's all already been dealt with. And I have a channel. I invite anyone for a one-on-one. We can go through each one of the 101 contradictions, and I'll be able to demonstrate that's the case. That's all.
Thank you, Jill. Daniel, I'm sure you want to respond to some of those things. I'm sure everyone else do, but again, we're going to go in the order. So Dirty Varmint, why don't you give some thoughts, and then we'll try to see how things go from there. We'll go back to Daniel. Try to just respond to things you said, and then we'll, before you introduce more points to discuss, let's try to focus on what we've already been discussing. Dirty Varmint, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree with Jill about they've been doing this for years. And before the 19th century, before they discovered the cuneiform tablets that identified Belshazzar, they used to say, oh, Belshazzar didn't even exist. blah, blah, blah. That's what they used to say before the 19th century. And then they discover these archaeological findings that Objectives was talking about. And it proves that Belshazzar did exist. And I did a simple search online of, what's the deal with Belshazzar? Why do they call him Nebuchadnezzar's son? And it brought me to this link on Bible Hub where there's a whole discussion. It's like a whole 2 pages, and it talks about how in the ancient Near East, the word son could simply mean descendant, a legal heir, ancestor, or predecessor. And there's also a lot of historians suggest that Belshazzar was actually married to Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter, making him an actual grandson. And I've explained this stuff to objective ethics before, so it's just like, it kind of goes to show he's just being dishonest, trying to make these claims as if he's never heard the answer to them, which he has. And I'll just go down to the bottom of the article here, and it says, archaeological discoveries, ancient historical records, and the linguistic context of the Book of Daniel corroborate rather than conflict with the biblical portrayal. The term son, as used in Daniel 5:2, remains both historically understandable and faithful to the way familial terminology functioned in the Semitic languages and in Near East royal protocol of that period. So, he already knows this, and even though I just told him that again today, and he can look up the link on Bible Hub himself and read the article, he'll still go around spouting that, Belshazzar wasn't his son, and it's ridiculous, man. Come on.
This way, Daniel, respond to so multiple people have made comments towards you, so try to be concise, but also feel free to respond appropriately. And then, because Eastern Thomas has joined us, we'll give him a second to kind of provide a few thoughts there. So go ahead, Daniel.
Sure, I'll try and see. There's a lot there to unpack and several different angles people are coming at, so I'm going to try and sort out these different responses here. As far as, let's see, it was Roy Chess was first. What you mentioned about created in his image, if I got that right, that wasn't actually my contention with the contradiction. The contradiction was in the order of events, and that I do believe would count as a contradiction, because either Adam was created before the animals or Adam was created after the animals, but it cannot be both. The thing about what Jill was saying, I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm well aware of the fact that these contradictions have been out there for, observed for a very long time. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of this whole live stream, but I already had actually addressed that when my Catholic friend Nathaniel, did he take off, by the way?
Yeah, I think he had to leave, unfortunately. So
okay.
He had
so Nathaniel, I'd already addressed this speaking to Nathaniel about that, so I can go back over all that if you want, or you can rewatch the beginning of this video. But I have no doubt that these things have been addressed, and that certainly that, like in regards to what I said to Nathaniel, is the Catholic Church has a rich history that's been around for obviously a couple thousand years, and they have some really deep thinkers. I mentioned Aquinas and Irenaeus, and you've got just so many different deep thinkers and early church fathers who have obviously noticed these texts that we'll call quote unquote problematic, and they have come up with some really, really deep answers and different ways of harmonizing all that. I'm well aware of all that. It doesn't affect what I was talking about, in the sense that I'm not making any definitive claims, unlike what Dirty Varmint is trying to accuse me of. My only claim here, and I don't know if Dirty Varmint just tuned in or if he's just doing his typical Dirty Varmint thing where he misquotes me and seems to intentionally misunderstand what I'm saying, because I literally said everything that Dirty Varmint just said I already said all that. I said I've heard the arguments 1,000 times. I literally said about the
say
and
that in Aramaic the word son means predecessor. It could be used for
I literally said
that.
I literally said that people use this as a throne name. I literally said that people said that he might be related to Nebuchadnezzar through familial ties. I literally said all that. You can go back and rewatch the video.
Well, so then why do you present it as a big contradiction and a big problem then for Christians?
I was talking specifically about archaeological evidence, if you were paying any attention. So you made some assertions, but what you didn't do was cite any archaeological evidence. That's
what archaeological evidence is going to uncover the vassal-like relationship that what's going on in that time. What exactly are you looking for? A tablet that says, yes, this relationship was vassal-like specifically?
Let me give you an example. So the archaeological evidence that we do have tells us what the family ties, tells us what the lineage was of Belshazzar, for example.
Nabonidus Chronicle, in this set of cuneiform inscriptions, Belshazzar is mentioned as the crown prince entrusted with administrative powers while Nabonidus was away. These texts affirm Belshazzar's high standing in the empire.
It doesn't say anything about him being related to Nebuchadnezzar.
Hold on. The text, what would have been preserved more than likely is a direct biological descendants, not necessarily those vassal-like relationships where you could be called a son also.
Okay, but that's an argument from absence, which is technically a logical fallacy. If you're going to make the argument, now again, the claim is about archaeological evidence. So
you're coming in presupposing that it should be listed as such. So if you're coming in presupposing such, it's not arguing from silence to suggest that, hey, in this time, parent-child connections were not only the ones that signified that type of relationship. So the burden of the proof would be still on you to demonstrate that could not have been the case. Not for us.
No, brother. All I'm talking about is archaeological evidence. That's my only thing I'm pointing out is that we have.
Okay.
Yeah, the claim is made.
Cover the idea. Archaeological evidence does uncover the idea that this term in the Babylonian Empire signified a broader relationship than just simply parent-child. True? True or false? In the Babylonian
It certainly
Empire,
can. Yes, I agree with that. It certainly can in some instances. Yeah.
Okay, so you have possibility A and possibility B. Now, which one was the author trying to intend to communicate? We don't know. You're assuming that, hey, this has got to be this way because there's no archaeological.
No, you're misquoting. You're misunderstanding me. I didn't assume it had to be any way. All I'm talking about is what we actually have evidence of. All I'm doing is having a conversation about archaeological evidence alone. If somebody's going, I'm not making
evidence do we have to suggest that this could not have been a relationship that did not denote parent-child. What archaeological evidence do we have to refute that idea?
It's not about the refutation because, again, I already said that this is not impossible. I've already said it's not impossible.
Well, then there's no contradiction. A contradiction means that you have a negation.
I didn't say that was a contradiction. The contradiction I'm talking about. No, I did not. I did not. I presented Genesis 1 and 2 as a contradiction. I presented the story about Chronicles and freaking 2 Samuel as a contradiction. I didn't say anything about contradiction.
You said the whole Belshazzar issue creates a big problem for Christians, and they just can't deal with it, and they got cooked and roasted.
Nobody said anything about getting cooked or roasted. I said I've heard the arguments 100,000 times, and you haven't brought anything new to the table so far. I've heard all this 1,000 times before.
Okay, this isn't a contradiction, so we can forget about Nebuchadnezzar's son. Okay, let's move on to Genesis then. This isn't a contradiction. I don't know why I was brought up in a conversation about contradictions. I guess it's no longer one. That's great.
And Genesis doesn't say that he created the animals after he created Adam. It says that he brought the animals, doesn't it? I mean, should we go to the verse?
Chapter 2 does say that the animals were created first.
Right, but then Objective says that later on it says that he created the animals after he created Adam, which is a lie. he knows that it doesn't say that he created the animals afterwards. It says that he presented Adam with the animals, for him to name. It doesn't mention
Let me
the
check.
order of
Hold on, let me
creation.
check. Hold on, let me check. So,
I think. I mean, I could be wrong.
because what I
Well,
presented to
I
you,
will bring up the verses. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this.
Okay.
Let's just read everything, just so everyone's on the same page.
if you can
All
go
right.
to Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, I believe. That's my
And compare it to Genesis chapter 2, verses, I think, 5 and 6.
All right, let's read Genesis chapter 1. Which verses?
I think 27, 27, 28.
So we can agree. All right, in Genesis chapter 1, God clearly creates the animals before the humans. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to Genesis chapter 2 and let's see if it says that God created the animals after humans. So should we just read?
Chapter 2 is the animals came, I think, after.
Okay, so we're just going to read. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed and all their hosts. By the seventh day, God completed his work, which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God had created and made. This is the account of the heavens and earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. Now no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground, but a mist used to rise from the earth. Well, this is going to take a long time.
Yeah, where's the verse?
Okay, so
the verse is going to be the animals come first.
I think here's the problem that Objective is trying to point out.
No, let me tell you. No. In chapter 2, verse 7, right, it says, streams came up from the ground, watered the whole surface. Then the Lord made man from the dust of the ground. Now the Lord had planted a garden. And then the Lord...
You read in chapter 1?
That's chapter 2. So chapter 2, man is now there before the garden even, much less before the animals. And you continue on before you get to the animals.
Let's read this carefully. Then, but a mist, this is verse 6. But a mist used to rise from the earth and the water the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. So does that verse explicitly say that the plants were created after men?
No, good point.
No.
It doesn't.
You're
reading into the text. The text does not say how long before man's creation, where there was no plant life.
I would say this. It doesn't say when the plants were created. It just said the Lord. It doesn't put a time reference on the creation of plants.
It kind of says that it's kind of saying that the plants were already created, but they haven't sprouted yet because there was no rain. Like the seeds,
No, he can create it all together as one thing. Like a human being, he didn't form a baby. He can create the full thing. So if you count 1 and 2 to be the same story, then the plants were definitely created first. So Genesis 1 tells you the order of creation.
Yeah, the plants were created first, but then in Genesis 2 it says, see, the plants haven't sprouted yet because there has been no rain. So the way it seems to imply that the plants were already created, but they just haven't sprouted yet because there was no rain.
That could mean there are no new plants sprouting because there is no rain. The ones that he created were created.
Well, I will say this: if you look in verse 7, God created man from the dust of the ground. No plants had sprouted. I think Dirty's correct. But then in verse 8, it just said the Lord God planted a garden. It doesn't say the Lord God planted a garden after making man. It just says that with no time reference whatsoever that the Lord God planted a garden. So it isn't logically necessary to assume that the planting of the garden happened after the creation of man.
So you have to be
Right.
clear with
Like
that.
there's a
Hold
difference
on.
between the word and the word then. Like in verse 7, it says, then the Lord God formed man, which means it's talking about, the event that took place after the previous event. But then when it says, and the Lord God planted a garden, it's not necessarily, taking place after the previous event because it doesn't say then.
Right. So how do you feel about, would you agree, objective, that it's not necessary to assume that the planting of the garden happens after? It's just something that the sentence in the text does happen after the creation of man, but it doesn't say that the event happened after chronologically. Would you agree with that?
Here's the problem: is that if you guys continue to read down through the story, right, it tells you what is happening and why it's happening. And if it happened in a different order, it wouldn't actually make sense to the way the text is written. So it says, he talks about now man in the garden and doing all this stuff in the garden, and it's like the Lord took man and put him in the Garden of Eden, right? And the Lord God, where does it say? Oh yeah, here it is. So you go down, work your way all the way down to 18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts and blah blah blah. So this now, then, now it delineates time and it gives you a reason why it's happening in the time it's happening. So you can read into it however you want, but you're basically,
if God created the animals first, and they're over there in Africa and South America and everywhere, and then he makes a garden for Adam, he can also create new animals right there in the garden. He doesn't have to go and pluck them out of Africa, pluck them out of South America. He could just create new ones. Like, even though they were already created before, he can still create new ones right there in the garden to show them to Adam.
I don't even think that's even necessary to speculate into him creating a new plant life just for the garden or new animals just for the garden. Remember, again, we talk about presuppositions. We're coming in, the critical scholars, that is, and this is what they make money off. This is how they make their bones. There's no business like book business or selling books and sensationalism.
Yeah.
But when you read a chronology into a text and then suggest, when you don't find it, that there's a contradiction, then that's where you come up with a contradiction. You create your own contradiction, basically. So several days of creation occur between Genesis 2:6 and 2:7. So that this is not to be read as a chronological, step-by-step process where both Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are matching. There's no contradiction. God speaks of creating vegetation on the third day in Genesis 1. Genesis 2 speaks about the first and second days. There was no vegetation. That matches Genesis 1. Go.
Okay, so there's a problem here. So let me hopefully you let me explain real quick. So when we say that the animals were created in a physical form, chapters 1 and chapters 2 are inconsistent. He's correct about that. When it comes to creating humans, there's two ways you can create humans, right? The way I suggested is that he created the spirit and the soul first in Genesis 1, and then in chapter 2, you get to the body. He creates the body from the dust of the ground, where he puts the spirit and the soul. So there is no contradiction for that reason, right? So the inconsistencies of the animal creation is the issue I think he's talking about, not the man.
The animal in Genesis 1, God records the animal life or creating animals on the sixth day before he created man. And
right.
In Genesis 2, it says, now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air.
Right.
So they're already there.
2, verse 18. That's after the man, after he formed the man and breathed into him the breath of life. So the man was
not saying that he's doing it. It's not saying that he's doing it. It's saying that
he did it already.
It's past tense.
Yeah. Right. So he created man first.
Right. In both accounts, he created man first. He brought them to the man. So the man is already there.
No.
And God brings the animals to him in Genesis 2:19. He's already there. He brought them to the man that he would name them. So
Yeah,
it's
that's chapter 2.
basically restating the fact that God had already that God created these things. It's not
No.
it's not giving you a chronology. So when you start reading like for instance, if I were to say now Jill went to Ace Theo's channel, and then he talked to Ace Theo. I could have. I'm trying to give a good analogy, but I'm just
I get what you're
recapping the
saying.
fact.
I get
I'm
what
just
you're saying, but
recapping the fact that I went to his channel.
yeah, but I get what you're
I'm
saying.
not.
But verse 20 in chapter 1, if you could read that, you will see that 21 actually. So God created the great creatures of the sky and every living thing with which the water teems, which the water teems, and that moves in and about it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. So here we're talking about the animals. We don't get to man until verse 27. So how do you explain that?
It doesn't right. What I'm saying is Genesis 2 does not say that God created man, then created the animals,
Yes,
and
it
then
does.
brought the animals to the man.
No,
Yes, it does.
Rather, the text says the Lord God had, we could say, already created the animals.
Yeah, but it was the
So there's
order.
no
The
contradiction.
order. The order is different. So he is
No, the order
correct
is
that the
not
order
different
is
Well,
because he's not
actually,
creating in the second account. It's just stating the fact that he had already created the animals.
No. That's not what it's saying.
Okay.
I
That's
mean,
not what
I
it's
mean,
saying.
we
He's
can
saying
pull up.
it's literally saying he created the animals after.
no, it
No,
isn't.
no,
It isn't
doesn't say
literally
that.
saying that. But it's not saying in that verse. The only problem with Jill is potentially where it says it's not good for man to be alone. So,
That's speaking about the creation of the woman, not the animals.
uh,
The animals had
okay.
already been
Right.
created, and he was alone because he had no mate. So he wasn't
because he was in
alone
the
because
garden.
nothing else.
And also,
was there.
okay. So, oh, by the way, sorry.
The animals were there.
All right.
They were
So,
created after.
Yeah, but they
before
weren't in
Adam.
the garden, so he created them in the garden and showed them.
Yeah, I don't really see. I think there's no contradiction if God had already created the animals, and this verse Genesis 2 is just restating the fact. It's not
Yeah.
giving you the
No,
chronology.
the order is wrong. That's
Well,
the
hold on,
problem.
Roy says.
Well, hold on. First and
hold
foremost,
on, everybody.
we're
Eastern Thomas has been waiting for a long time, and I feel
Okay.
like everyone else has had a chance to kind of give their perspective. So, Thomas, what are your thoughts? Because there's so many people, try to limit it to like at least like at most 2 minutes. But and then I think we should go back to Daniel because I think he probably wants to say some things, and then we'll try to go around once or twice more. So Thomas, give your thoughts for a minute or two, and then we'll go to Daniel, and then we'll go back around. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would just quickly, I guess I'll just keep it very short. I would just concur with Jill on this one. I know the interpretation that St. Thomas Aquinas comes up with is that Genesis 1 is a strictly chronological account of creation, and Genesis chapter 2 is a topological account of that. In the sense that it's more so just presenting certain facts through the perspective of Adam. So I would agree with Jill that it's not really so much a contradiction of the order of events in so much as it's just a switching of narrative devices.
Well,
Yeah, these are literary devices. Genesis 1 is a literary device. I don't know why people are reading chronologies into any of these texts. They never intended to be read such way. But again, this is another case of critical scholarship coming in presupposing Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are supposed to align and match word for word almost. And when it doesn't, it's like, oh, contradiction. But when it does, collusion. It's either it's basically sensationalism, sophistry. They're selling books. Bart Ehrman even admitted such. Go watch
The objective, I feel like we might be going around in circles here at this point, but at the same time, a lot of things have been said. So go ahead and make your remarks if you have any.
Well, just my brain is hurting from last night's debate and all the study for that. And trying to keep up with all the pretzels you guys are twisting yourselves in to harmonize this is giving me a headache. Everything, almost everything that you guys have said, almost everything that you guys have said, I literally have already said this almost verbatim. Like he brought up St. Thomas Aquinas. I literally just got to talking about that 45 minutes ago. I mean, literally everything you guys have said, that the idea that it's a summary, that it's not to be taken literally. I mean, I literally already.
So let me say this. You don't think that anything that's been said tonight resolves the issue potentially. None of the interpretations that have been put forth are valid or sound in your opinion. Objective.
I didn't say they're invalid. I certainly would not call them sound, and I didn't say they're invalid either. So it's possible. What you guys are saying is certainly possible. It's possible I could be wrong. It's possible the critical scholars could be wrong. It's possible people have presuppositions. But let me ask you guys, if Dirty Varmint, can you please just put a cork in it? Thank you. And let me just ask you gentlemen something here for a second. I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong. I'm willing to admit that the information I read could be wrong. And I'm willing to acknowledge there's a presupposition. Are you guys willing to also do the same thing, or does it have to be right because it's the word of God? What is your presupposition, and what level of confidence is it 100% has to work out? What I'm saying is absolutely impossible. What the critical scholars are saying is absolutely impossible. Is that because that's what you guys sound like?
Are you willing to do those other things, but are you willing to like not bring it up, as if it's a big problem? Oh, Christians.
Well, no, I would say yes.
With this.
It's impossible because the burden of proof is on the critical scholar. If the critical scholar wants to come into the text and screen contradiction, he first has to prove that the author supposed that this was supposed to be what he is envisioning. For example, if I see two cats and I believe those two cats are twins, then I'm presupposing they should look the same. They should have the same eyes. They should have the same fur pattern, etc., etc. So I'm coming in presupposing such. So if I walk into your home presupposing such, the burden of proof is on me, not for you to say to me, hey, prove these cats, you demonstrate that these cats are not twins. So you come into Genesis 1 and 2 with the presupposition that they are supposed to be chronological and matching each other chronologically. Well, you now need to demonstrate that that was in fact the author's intention. Before we get to the Christian in his response to your alleged contradiction, prove that the presupposition you are coming in with is actually corresponds to reality. That's actually what the author intended to do. Otherwise, we'll be here all night, going back and forth, trying to harmonize a text that never needed to be harmonized in the first place.
Okay, so I got an answer from Varmint and Jill. Eastern Thomas, A's, and Roy Chess, are you on the same boat that you guys have no presuppositions and it absolutely has to be the way that you guys are defining it?
That's not what he said. See, this guy's just so dishonest.
What I said was you come in already. Well, let me repeat it really succinctly. What I said was you come in with the idea that something needs to be harmonized in the first place. You need to demonstrate that first.
Let's be fair to objective. He did ask directly, is it within the realm of logical possibility that the Bible just has an error here? And
because it never intended to match. Like, for example, if I go to the store and I buy,
that's your perspective. That's your perspective. We've heard that.
Okay, yeah. So you have to first demonstrate that before I can respond to your contradiction. Prove that the author is intended to match. If I come outside with a red shirt on, you come outside with a red shirt on, that's no proof that we intended to wear red shirts on the same day. You need to demonstrate that was the actual author's intention in the first place, that there was some sort of collusion that went wrong, but that perhaps they sat down and they tried to copy each other and they got it wrong. This person has the animals before the man. This person has the man before the animals. You would have to demonstrate that to be the case.
But the order is wrong. Hold on, Roy Chess.
They never intended to put it in order. That's the point.
Roy Chess can go after me, and then Thomas, if they want to respond at all. But I will say that because the Bible is a document that was ultimately even transmitted by humans, every single thing in it could potentially be an error. That doesn't mean I believe it's an error. It just means that it could potentially be an error or in error. So if the Bible is wrong and right here, and somehow I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it is within the realm of logical possibility. I don't think it's been necessarily established, but it is something that could potentially be possible. So that's how I would respond to his question. Roy Chess?
I would respond that it is technically possible because of the translations, right? So if it's the original and the English version chooses to use a different word and that word has a different kind of context to it, it could be an error for that context. So yes, it could be an error in the translation.
All right,
Can I
Thomas.
add something to that?
Okay. Varmint, and then if Thomas has a thought, go ahead.
I mean, the problem I see with objective ethics here is like, does he really care whether the animals were created before Adam or after Adam? I don't think he cares. He just wants to find a reason to dunk on Christians. Like, he doesn't care which one is true. He thinks that the animals popped out of nowhere. So, it's like he doesn't care. Perhaps there is a contradiction. Perhaps there are two stories that are interwoven together, but he doesn't care about finding which one is the truth. He just wants to dismiss the whole entire story and say, "Oh, animals popped out of nowhere." So it's like he's just being dishonest about about his intentions. He's got malicious intentions. I think he got malicious intentions there. Objective.
Is somebody using their vibrator there, or what's going on there? Just kidding. Thomas, go ahead.
Yes. Well, first of all, I apologize. I was just shaving my cheeks there. I thought I was on mute. I apologize. So, I mean, to answer objective ethics questions, is it within the logical realm of possibilities that there was an error in the Bible? Well, I mean, if it's the word of God, then the answer would be no, it's not within the realm of logical possibilities. Now, I know that that's making a claim that, objective ethics is probably something we disagree on. I would say it is the word of God. Objective ethics, I know, would say that it's not the word of God. But I would say because of the motives of credibility that we have, for the authenticity of the Bible, such as prophecies and consistent wisdom, and just the attesting nature of Scripture. I would say because of that makes it more and more logical to suggest that it is the Word of God and that it is the truth. And if that's the case, then I would say it's not within the logical realm of possibility that it can be an error.
I'm
Okay,
holding to the fact that there aren't any, because all of the ones that were brought up have been basically dismissed. So that's where I'm standing until someone can demonstrate under cross-examination a contradiction. There are none. That's where I stand.
Okay, gentlemen, I do appreciate you answering it directly as at least possible in most cases. So let me ask you one more question, if I may. I have openly admitted that I could be wrong, the scholarship could be wrong, and that that it could certainly possible that you guys are right. There are some of you who have also done the same thing, that on the reverse side of that, there's some of you who are absolutely certain that it can't be wrong. The burden of proof is kind of interesting that you would mention that, because technically I'm not making a claim that it is one way or the other. My original claim was that it appears to be a literal contradiction in the order of events, right? That's what it appears to be. It's not definitive. It's not a definitive claim.
Right?
It looks like it could be. Okay, so if you're going to say it's not,
but what are you
right? It's just like the. Excuse me, brother. Do you mind if I finish my sentence?
Okay.
It looks like the same kind of problem that you get with hard atheists versus theists, right? Is that the hard atheists say, well, the theists called Christians for whatever have the burden of proof, and the hard atheist says, I don't have any burden of proof. Both parties actually maintain a element of burden of proof, right? Because you're both making definitive claims. If you just say, hey, this appears to be this way, I don't really hold a burden of proof for saying this is what it looks like to me, other than to make my case.
Well,
as far as I'm concerned, listen,
other than to try to dunk
bro,
on Christians, you
could
don't
you just
care what the truth
take it
is,
easy,
man.
bro? Hold on, gentlemen. Jesus Christ. So the question I would have for you guys is, how is somebody like myself, who's more than willing to accept that I could be wrong, right? Who's just observing what seems to be apparent to me, how would people who are determined they absolutely cannot be wrong, do you think you're going to have a productive conversation with somebody when you are so determined that you cannot be wrong? Does that seem very functional in just the way we engage in society?
Well, no one claimed that you cannot be wrong. But what we're saying is you have been wrong every time. That's what we're saying. So secondly, you presuppose that these accounts are carbon copies. So since you're the one coming in with the presupposition, you have to demonstrate that is a claim. You're making a claim, but it's sort of through innuendo, what I call. This is all critical scholarship is. Thirdly, that critical scholarship, or what you call critical scholarship, which are just atheists, just liberal atheists, right, who hate the Bible, and therefore no miracles can be in the Bible, therefore contradiction, scientifically, etc. So there is a whole nother field of scholarship that perhaps you're not aware of. Conservative scholarship, biblical scholars, people who actually have also PhDs in biblical studies in Hebrew and Greek and all those things. So there is an entire different side of scholarship in which it's not even addressed or read or studied, as if Bart Ehrman is the only one that's read the Bible and studied the Bible. That's the problem you have, because all of these contradictions have already been addressed for decades. I'm telling you, brother. If you want, I've sat atheists down for 2 hours and we've gone through all of these contradictions to determine that they're not contradictions.
Yeah, well, you can do that with him. He'll bring it up the next stream. He'll still bring up the same thing and say, "Oh, it's a contradiction."
They're atheists presupposing something about the Bible before they examine the Bible, and then when they examine it and find that what they presuppose isn't the case, they say, "Ha, contradiction." Well, I'm always going to go back to your presupposition, because that is the first claim. That is the first positive claim. Genesis 1 is supposed to match Genesis 2 chronologically. That is a claim. You need to.
No, that's not what his claim was. Can I give slight pushback?
That's his presupposition.
Can I give slight pushback?
Presupposition, which is a claim, which is leading to the contradiction he supposes.
No. Can I give slight pushback, please?
Roy Chess, take a couple minutes. Go ahead. 2 minutes.
Right. So when you say that it's not supposed to add up chronologically, do you hold that same thing when someone asks you, was man created first or was the Eve created first? Because you're saying it doesn't have to add up, right? So it could be different.
No, that's not what I'm saying. See, you're presupposing.
So I'm not presupposing anything.
Yes,
no, I didn't. I'm asking you a direct question.
Let me explain.
There was no presupposing. You said that the timeline. I didn't people. No,
yes,
don't
did.
give me this.
I'll show you again how you presuppose it. Go ahead.
Don't give me this. Logic is about assumptions and don't do that. I study this. Well, I'm not a Bible scholar. I do the philosophy thing, the logical thing, right? So I'm asking you a direct question. I didn't give an axiom or an assumption.
Let me demonstrate that. Let me quickly demonstrate that. Our Genesis 1 is Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 chronological orders of creation. Yes or no?
The way it is written that way. Yes.
Thank you for proving my point. So you come in.
I didn't come in with nothing.
You come in presupposing
now
it is written that way.
No. You're making a claim.
I'll let you talk. I didn't cut you off.
You're making a claim.
I didn't cut you off.
You have to back it up.
You just demonstrated it.
No,
you just demonstrated my point.
I asked you.
You came in saying that these two accounts are chronological events or chronological stories.
You're saying chronologically,
and you say, hold on, brother, hold on, and you're saying that's the way it reads. So you're coming in presupposing that is the default reading, and now the Christian has to harmonize your default reading
No,
Okay,
no, no,
so
no.
let's change your default reading to they were never intended to be chronological, both of them. Maybe Genesis 1,
Okay,
but
so
certainly not
if one
Genesis
of them
2.
said Eve was created first, would you still uphold that position?
Genesis 2 does not say
I'm not
that
saying they
man
said,
was
Steve, I'm not,
created first, or that
what?
yeah, right.
What? It doesn't?
Genesis 2,
Genesis
All
2
right,
doesn't
hold
says
say
on.
that?
Hold on.
God
Hold on.
created the animals after
All
he
right, both of you,
created
hold
man.
on.
Okay,
All right, I
Genesis
think
2 says the same thing in that respect as
No,
Genesis
it
1.
doesn't. No,
I
it
think
doesn't.
that as far as
Okay.
this particular biblical contradiction, we've had a good amount of discussion. I'm not sure a resolution has been reached, but unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're going to have to end the stream. I hate to do it, but basically at this point, we're all just going to have one final statement. To each person will have a 2 to 3 minutes. So whatever you want to say, but keep it limited to that because we're ending the stream. So I guess we're going to start in reverse order of how people join. So the order is going to be this. It's going to be Thomist, Dirty Varmint. I think it was Roy. Jill will be next after that, then Roychest, then Objective Ethics. So Thomist, like I said, everyone 2 to 3 minutes at most, and then I'm going to boot you. So go ahead, Thomist.
Yeah, I was just kind of hoping to respond because I know Objective Ethics asked a follow-up question, which was, if we believe that it is not reasonable to say one thing can't be true or that there's an error in the Bible, is it rational to have a conversation with another person? And I just wanted to clarify my position on the matter. I don't say that it's outside of the reasonable possibilities because I'm presupposing that. I'm saying that because reason does not align with the idea that the Bible is not the Word of God, it's not reasonable to assume that there are errors in the Bible. So, for example, if someone were to say, well, I believe 2 plus 2 equals 5, wanted to, and I were to say, well, no, I don't think that's within the rational possibilities. I'm not assuming or pre-assuming that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm merely saying based on reason based on reasonable conclusions, it's not rational to assume that 2 plus 2 would equal anything but the number 4 in that regards. And so when it comes to the inerrancy of Scripture, we would say that because of the fulfillment of prophecies and because of the consistent ethics that we see in the Scriptures, we would say that these are motives of credibility that lead us to the conclusion that the Bible is the Word of God, and therefore, if it's the Word of God, then it has to be inerrant. We're not saying that everyone should just pre-assume. That's not what we're saying. I just wanted to make a clarification on that, just to kind of make at least my position clear on that.
Okay, well, I guess unfortunately that's going to have to be your final statement, Thomas. But it was something that was directly asked, and it is relevant to everything that was being said. So I hope that's you're okay with that. Thank you for that,
Of
Thomas.
course. Thanks.
All right, thank you for coming. All right, Dirty Varmint, you can go ahead.
Okay, I guess my final comments will be directed towards objective ethics. And I know he enjoys being the center of attention, but he is the guest of honor. So, he mentioned that, oh, how can we have a productive conversation, blah, blah, blah. And I would like to ask you, like, how do you expect to have a productive conversation with Christians when your sole intention on this panel and on most of the places you go is to dunk on Christians and to cook Christians and to roast the Christians? I mean, you mentioned earlier about your buddies on some other channel and how he just cooks the Christians and how that's so great and ha 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 ha. And so, I mean, how can you expect to have a productive conversation? You claim that's what you intention, but I see right through you, man. You're just here to try to dunk on Christians. You're not an agnostic. Quit pretending you're an agnostic. You're a Christian hater. I mean, otherwise, why do you get so much pleasure out of dunking on Christians and cooking them and roasting them? And it's so that's, I guess that's my comments. Thanks for having me on. And
all right,
yeah,
Daniel, you will have a chance to respond to all that. So, but good to see you, Dirty.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. All right. So who was next? I think either Roy or let's go with Jill. I don't remember who was next. So Jill, you go next.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I just want to read Genesis 2 again, just to demonstrate one more time that these are all presuppositions. We're coming into the text, reading into the text. Genesis 2 is giving us an order of creation when it's not. Genesis 2 is concentrating on man, and it's referring to the Genesis 1 describes a sequence, I would say, of creation. I wouldn't even say that, actually. I don't think Genesis is giving us a chronology of creation at all, in my opinion. But certainly not Genesis 2. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air. This is not a creation account. It is telling you, as a matter of fact, that this is what God has done. It's not giving you what Genesis 1 gave you. Okay, you come into the text assuming that Genesis 2 is giving you the same thing that Genesis 1 is giving you, a chronology of creation. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Okay, then it says he brought them to the man. Didn't say he created the man. You read that into the text, that there's a chronology occurring here in Genesis 2. It says he formed it. It's not saying God formed the animals, then he created the man, then he brought them to the man to see that you don't have that then type of chronology language in Genesis 2. So obviously that's not the author's intention. But again, people will come in with that assumption. The text does not say that God created the man, then created the animals, and then brought the animals to man. Rather, the text says, now the Lord God had created all the animals. There's no contradiction. Okay. Actually, the accounts are actually complementary. God is describing the sequence of creation in Genesis 1. And then in Genesis 2, he clarifies and gives us the most important details about the sixth day. Okay. So these are both literary devices. Actually, I did a video on Genesis 1. I don't think Genesis 1 is given a chronology of creation either, but that's another stream. Maybe we'll have that discussion, A's, about Genesis 1 and 2.
Yeah, I certainly think that's an interesting claim, but again, it'll have to be saved for another time. So thank you for your comments, Jill.
Okay, appreciate you. See you next time.
All right, thank you. All right, Roy Chess, a minute or two.
Yes, sure. Thank you again for having me. I kind of understand where objective ethics is coming from, but I think he's correct that there is an inconsistency there, but it is not a contradiction. And real quick, just so that we understand what a contradiction
Brother, we lost you. We didn't hear anything after objective ethics the first time. So can you get a better connection? Because I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'd also like to just mention something to you before you leave the room if I can.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, do you mind is it okay, A's, if he starts over with his time? I can sacrifice some of my time.
I actually was able to hear him, but Roy Tess, why don't you start over so objective ethics can hear everything you said?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I said that thank you for having me as usual. I kind of understand where objective ethics is coming from because I too think that there is an inconsistency with the stories, but they're not contradictory, right? So just real quick, what contradictory, people tend to think that contradictory means that two things can't be true at the same time. That's not quite complete, right? So if I give you a statement A and a statement B and both of them are false, that's not contradictory. That's a different relationship, right? Contradictory specifically means that both cannot be true and both cannot be false. So when you use the word contradiction, you have to be sure that they're not both false, right? So if I say my name is Joe and I'm a billionaire, both of those statements are false, right? So if I give you two false statements, that's not a contradiction, even if it's inconsistent, right? Even though that's a bad example, but I'm short on time. So the way it is written, chapter 2 is very confusing, to say the least, if you are not sure, if you're not already a Christian. And I think that's where objective is coming from, that if you are a Christian with beliefs, you can bypass certain things. There is no presupposition, as the other gentleman is saying. So, he's on that everything is an assumption type of thing, it sounds like, where we can't possibly know anything. And I asked him a very specific question about the creation of Adam and Eve. Did that matter? Did the order matter there? Did that matter? Like the chronological, is that chronological, or was it Eve first and then the man bit the apple? I mean, if we're saying that the chronological order doesn't matter, why stop there, right? Why stop at, whether the animals are created first or man? I don't see why. Maybe Eve was first and then Adam was created out of Eve's rib. If we take the order out of it, you have to eliminate that possibility too if we take the order out. The way it is at least written, the way objective said, there is an inconsistency there. Now, the inconsistency is covered because the human definition, creation, is two-folded. One is the creation of the physical body. One is the creation of the spirit, like I told you. In the first chapter, man is created first, the spirit, not the body. The animals are created in chapter 1 first, the physical body. They don't have spirits or souls, allegedly, right? So in chapter 1, they're created first. The man is created last, but he's created in a spiritual form, not a physical form. Chapter 2 talks about the physical form, and then man became a living soul after God breathed, gave him the breath of life, basically. All right, so that would defeat the contradiction argument. There is no contradiction if the spirit was created first and the soul with it, and then the soul was created and put in the body, and that's where Adam is now created and naming the animals, which were created before him physically. So thank you for having me, and we can talk again another time.
All right, thank you, Roy.
Yeah, Roy. Before you go though, real quick, if I may, I'm monumentally disappointed that this divulged into or digressed into a conversation about contradictions. These are the kind of conversations that are a complete waste of time for many reasons, in my opinion. But I do want to say that that I've been working on my syllogism that I talked to you about before. So one of these days, you and I are going to have to get together with A's or whatever, and maybe talk a little bit about objective ethics and that whole thing. But you have a good night. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Roy Chess. You're next until next time. Yeah, before you go, I also want to say feel free to, because it was kind of just you against pretty much everyone else. Take a little more time if there are a lot of points you want to address. I want you to feel like you have an adequate amount of time to respond to everyone without feeling rushed. And then before you don't just hop out, because I want to say something to you as well after you're done saying. So go ahead.
Oh, you're very gracious for that. And I don't want to waste a lot of time on it because, as I said quite clearly before this whole thing started, before these guys even jumped in the room, this is the exact type of thing that I prefer to avoid. And this is the exact reason. I do find it, one thing I will say is that for the gentleman, trying to keep track of everybody here, it doesn't surprise me, first of all, that I was the target of all this. A lot of verbal abuse, frankly. Most of that comes from Dirty Varmint, of course, so that's typical. But I do, as the skeptic, the only skeptic in the room, I accept that that's just the nature of things, and that in and of itself is fine. If I don't want to participate in it or I don't have the thick enough skin for it, I don't have to be here, obviously. So ultimately, I get it. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me. As far as Mr. Thomas, or Thomas, however you say his name goes, he was the only one who really kind of tried to address that question I had. and he used words like we and we. And I don't know, I was really looking for specific people to maybe take some accountability for their own presuppositions, which are apparent, whether they want to admit it or not. I'm just curious as to how they think they got away from everything they were accusing me and all the critical scholars of without knowing anything about me and not accepting my position as I tell them, that suddenly that just doesn't apply to them or something. That's very interesting to me. The point that I made about, or the question that I asked was actually answered, even though people wouldn't answer it directly or even address it directly. And the answer is you're not going to have a productive conversation with people if you are determined that you can't be wrong. If you're 100% determined you cannot be wrong entering a conversation, it's literally pointless to have a conversation with other people because you're not wrong. So you might as well just sit in a room in a corner and talk to yourself, in my opinion. As far as the way this whole thing went, it was very interesting because if people would actually go back and rewatch this video from the beginning, I think it happened after you started live. I literally said that this is what happens. This is the problem. I literally said that I don't enjoy engaging in these things because I don't want to be dunking on the Bible. And then here I get accused of that's my only motivation. And it's so wild to me. I don't know if Dirty Varmint wasn't here for that or he decided to just disregard it or what his trip is. Clearly, he's got some kind of an animosity with me. I've challenged him to have a debate with me about some of these claims that he makes about the global flood and everything else. And he doesn't want to do that, but he wants to come in and throw stones and call me names and all this other crazy stuff. It is starting to wear on me. I'm going to be honest with you. He's got to either step up to the plate or he's going to have to learn to be a gentleman, and we're going to have some civil discussions because his routine is getting very old. It's immature, and it's frankly, it's not a good look for him as far as I'm concerned. And I'm sure there's things on my own side, faults of my own that are leading into this, the way that I'm articulating things or however I'm doing. My own approach is obviously not perfect, so I need to reflect on my own shortcomings, not just on his as well, and I accept responsibility for that. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. The one thing I did want to talk to you about personally is I just recently came across a new platform that I think you might be very interested in, A's, because it's a great way to interact with diverse groups of people. You don't have to just interact with atheists. You can interact with other theists who you might want to debate about Trinitarianism or any of the other issues that you're passionate about, evolution, whatever you're into. It's called Free for Talk. Have you heard of this before? Have you used it?
No, I've never heard about it, but I'm interested. So why don't you describe it to me and what you've?
Yeah,
I guess
you need.
Go ahead.
You need to check this out because I instantly thought of you when I went on this thing for the first time the other day. It's supposed to be a communication, or they're calling it a language platform, right? So that people from different countries can basically engage in normal dialogue with each other and help to learn other languages. Is my understanding of the premise of the program. But what it actually is, in addition to that, is it's a massive free hub where people can go and set up rooms and engage with people all over the world about all kinds of different ideas. And I came across this because the gentleman that we both know, James Apperson, he had invited me to join a room that he was live streaming. So you can stream your StreamYard while you're on this other app. I'm not sure how the technology works with that because I don't do the streaming, but you would be able to figure it out easily. So you could go onto this room, you could set up a whole lobby with as many people as you want. You're not limited to the 6 people. Now, I think more than 6, it gets a little chaotic. More than 3, frankly, it gets a little chaotic. But you could set up however many people you want, and you could stream that through your StreamYard streaming service if it's something you wanted to do. And the other thing you could do is really promote your channel through this avenue. It's a great networking tool. And if you decide you want to get involved in it, let me know, because there is a couple of tricks to the trade. When you first sign up, it is free, but when you first sign up, you could either do the paid version and you get all the bells and whistles right away, or if you do the free version, you have to have a minimum of 15 followers, and you have to be a member of the program for at least 7 days, at which point then you can start selecting your own custom topics and hosting your own rooms with custom topics. Before that, your avatar doesn't show up. It just gives your initials based off your Google account. You can't select a topic. You can set up a room, but you can't select any. You can't type in like I want to talk about religion or whatever. So once you get your 15 followers and you're on for 7 days, then you have free access to all the bells and whistles. And there's a really slick trick to getting your 15 followers. I got mine in like, oh gosh, an hour and a half. Just now, granted, I am a very social person, as you know, and I do tend to get along with most people who are reasonable. So it was pretty easy for me to pick up the 15 followers, right? But there is a trick to it. Some people host rooms encouraging this. I could help you out by setting something up and then letting people come into my room and explaining to them that it's a room to help people gain followers. And I could get you set up fairly easily as far as that goes. So don't let that be a deterrent to you, okay?
Yeah, first of all, yes, thank you for bringing this to my attention. The thing is, let me put it this way. I would like to do it, yes, and I'm interested and I'm going to look into it. The thing is, like, in case you haven't noticed, I haven't been doing all that much content on my channel recently. I'm just so busy in so many areas of my life that I don't have a lot of time to do engagements, and the YouTube thing has just kind of been a convenient side project for me. But if I am looking to get into having like these conversations more often, then I absolutely will. I will look into it either way. And if I decide that I want to invest myself in kind of doing that, then maybe I will reach out to you and kind of ask for assistance in that way. But let me look into it first and just kind of see what it's all about. What did you say it's called again?
So it's the word free, the number 4, and the word talk. Free for talk. And I would go through their website, not try and find the app, because with the App Store, there's so many knockoffs and stuff. So go through their actual website, free for talk.
Okay, free for talk. Okay, I'll look into it. Yeah. All right. And before you go, I just want to say, like, just because, like, I know that you're the only person of a kind of a different perspective who is like we all have different perspectives. Like I disagree with Jill, I disagree with Varman on things where I test all of those people, but you were kind of the only one kind of with your specific viewpoint who is here tonight. And I don't want you to think I set it up that way. The thing is, like, it just kind of, if there had been another skeptic who had wanted to join, like I see Johnny B is now commenting, like I would have gladly let him in and let you two kind of to have to kind of participate in the discussion together in that way. So I don't want you to think that I purposely wanted to dogpile on top all these theists on you and just kind of swamp you or not allow you to speak or anything like that. It just kind of
I missed when you said purposely went to. I lost your connection there. Something. I don't know what's going on. I can see your avatar and everything.
Yeah. Let me fix something real fast. Not on my end. Basically, I just want to say, like, I don't want you to think that I just let a whole bunch of theists in the room to kind of swarm you, and because I know that sometimes when I go to atheist rooms, it does kind of feel when you have like 5 people arguing against you and you're the only one. It's a little nerve-wracking. It's a little frustrating, and you almost are never able to talk because everyone else is constantly throwing things at you, and you can't respond to everything. So I really just don't want you to feel like I did that on purpose. It's just kind of the nature of the discussion we were having and who wanted to join at what time. So I honestly had no intention of just having a bunch of people arguing against you and you not having a chance to respond.
Yeah. No. Let me address that real quick. I have absolutely no misconceptions about what happens in here. I understand I'm in hostile territory, and the thing is, as far as I'm concerned and what I see online, I'm actually one of the more reasonable skeptics because, I do admit that I could be wrong, and I do admit that, scholars could be wrong and stuff, but I'm just honest about not being convinced by the arguments I'm hearing. And I'm still going to take a lot of flack for that. People are going to throw me in that same boat, but I do expect to get that. And so that's no problem. I don't think you're setting me up for anything. I found you to be, despite our differences on how we see things and different approaches to things, as I've said before, I find you to be an honest person to the best of your ability. I think that you're genuinely looking for truth as best as you know how to do it. And I think that you're a sincere human being, and I speak very highly of you outside of this room, and I don't mind telling you that. You know what I mean? So no, I have absolutely no qualms about. When I come in here, I expect. Now, I will admit that it does get a little frustrating when people like Dirty Varmint want to start calling me names and these kind of personal attacks and telling me what my intentions are and all this other nonsense. It does get a little annoying. But as far as like a Jill person who refuses to listen and is so determined that he wouldn't even let the other Christians talk. You know what I mean? He just wanted to dominate. He just couldn't stop running his mouth. Frankly, he just had to keep going. It's annoying, but for the most part, that it just comes with the territory. We're all human beings. And I understand also that you guys, in generally speaking, here, not trying to point any fingers at anyone particularly, but you guys are very passionate about this. It means a lot more to you than it does to me. So my approach to everything is going to be significantly different than your guys' approach to it. And I get all that. I totally get all that.
Yeah, and also what other people say, I really can't control them. If I let other people in the room, then eventually things are going to be said, even if we agree in certain areas on, theologically, religion, whatever. People are going to say things that I think are kind of below the belt, but at the same time, just like you said, you didn't to get into these conversations. You kind of have to have thick skin a little bit. You kind of have to be ready for personal attacks and things like that. So, yeah, don't take it personally from me. It's just the nature of having a bunch of people in a room talking, and people say things, and sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I don't. So just don't take anything like a disclaimer. The views of everyone else are not my own. So let's put it that way.
No, you're good, brother. And I didn't know Johnny B was here because I would have loved to have him come up. He's another very civil, very respectful person. You might remember him from that evolution debate.
I do. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he's great. Now, I mentioned maybe him joining me again in a conversation at some point, and I didn't mean necessarily tonight. I'm surprised he jumped in. I didn't know he was available. I would have told him we were doing it. But so I do want to set something up in the future with Johnny and myself and talk to you about some other issues and stuff, because there's a lot of fascinating things I'd much rather talk about, like, can you have consciousness without the brain, and how does consciousness tie into the brain and the mind and philosophy? And could care less about biblical contradictions, frankly, especially at this point in my life. I mean, like, nothing those guys said, there wasn't a single new argument that I hadn't heard before. I told them those arguments before they even joined the room. I already articulated those arguments in a specific or even broad perspective. So none of that surprised me whatsoever. So I'd rather talk about something that's new and interesting and fruitful, in the future.
Yeah. I will say one thing, one perhaps small criticism, is that I think the reason things went the way they did, and maybe this is an area of a self-correction perhaps, is that technically, if you go back and look at the screen, you were the one who introduced the contradictions as a point of discussion. So just because of that, when you started saying those things, not that I understand that was not an area into which you wanted to go into a discussion, but because they were brought up, other people wanted to address them, and that's the reason that it went in that direction. So just be aware that if you bring up a topic, even if you personally, it's more like a side point or kind of a passing point, other people may want to address that, and that's kind of why I kind of let other people into the room, even though it was originally just you, me, and Taurus, which is kind of all of our original intentions. When I saw that other people were kind of taking, basically wanted to take mixed statements to arguments against what you're saying, I was like, I think it'd be fair to let them in to make their case. So that's kind of the reason kind of things broke down and went the direction they did. So I guess just like the thing I would say is if you bring up something, even if you don't intend to go into that area of discussion, you kind of have to be willing to defend it at a deeper level if other people want to do that. So that's kind of the one thing I would say, but it's no big deal because, it's all important and, discussion to be had about things that this channel is about. So it's not a problem for me. I'm just saying that, if something is brought up, then out of fairness, I think it's just fair to let the other people have a say about it. So that's kind of why things went the way they did, in my opinion. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, I'll always consider constructive criticism. I got no problem with that, and I should go back and rewatch the video because my memory of the situation is that I was actually being very gracious to what Dr. McAllister was saying, that you can't take everything so literally, and there's two different sides to the story. And I was simply giving examples, and you having a very natural conversation with you, me, and Nathaniel about, it was the natural progression of the conversation. It wasn't me, at least intending to just come out and say, oh, we have contradictions here, let's hash this all out. But so maybe again, it could be my own shortcoming. I'll have to go back and watch the video and see where things went off the rails there. But and I will take your advice on that. And I appreciate you telling me that.
No, you're right. You're right, though. You're right, though. It's kind of like you were making a point that was totally within alignment of everything that. And to be honest, I was really enjoying the conversation you and me and Nathaniel were having. I really was. And I kind of almost wish it had continued going. But at the same time, like I said, I think that everyone else having their chance to express their opinion was a good thing as well. It's just, I don't know. It was kind of difficult for me to like. Just because, like you said, I know it wasn't your intention to go in that direction, but just the fact that other people heard you say that made them want to respond. And I kind of had to make a decision. Do I ignore them and just kind of go ahead, or do I kind of get some more participation? It's kind of like, that was a decision I was trying to make. And I guess whether I made the right decision or not is up to everyone else to decide, but that's kind of what I decided to do. So I'll put that's just kind of how it happened.
All right, brother. Well, I'm going to let you do your outro, and I'm going to thank you once again for being such a gracious host. And I'm going to thank everybody, including Dirty Varmint and everybody else, for coming in and speaking their mind and trying to make their arguments, because at the end of the day, this is how we express ourselves, and it's a non-violent approach. And given the nature of the way things are these days, I think this is very important to continue to promote this kind of dialogue. I would prefer it went a little bit more respectfully and more organized, with people talking over each other. That's not your fault. You know what I'm saying? It just we had certain people that had a dominant personality, and that happens. So it wasn't perfect, but this is significantly better than things that we're seeing happening on the news. That's for sure, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to step out and just thank you once again for hosting, especially on such short notice. And you and I should reach out and really come up with a topic like objective ethics or the consciousness or whatever you want to talk about, and we'll figure it out. And I'll continue to come in when you host these videos. And if it's not a topic that I think if it's a topic that I joined that I know it's going to be a shitstorm, I will stay in the chats. You know what I mean? And like I have been some of these last videos. Okay.
Well, you've been talking a long time about your syllogism and wanting to talk about grounding in natural morality and naturalism. So maybe get you and Johnny and it can be a couple of you, and we'll have a conversation about that sometime in the near future when it's possible. So we can try and set something like that up. See if we can get a time.
Okay, brother, that sounds really good. I'm sorry, one last thing real quick. I forgot. There's an atheist who wants to debate me about objective ethics. And so I don't know if you'd be interested in hosting that or not on your channel, or if you want
I have other. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to.
It depends.
And I also do want to hear. Yeah. No, I would like to do it here to help you build content. And I would also be really interested in hearing more about your upcoming debate. I know you don't want to give out too much of your strategy. I think people can probably look through your content and figure out what your arguments are going to be. But yeah, I'd love to hear about that and make sure that I tune into that too, because I haven't had a chance to hear you do a formal debate yet. And you present your arguments very intelligently. So I'm assuming that you're going to do really well, and I'm hoping the best for you.
I really appreciate that. And maybe in my outro, I won't go into specific arguments, but I will talk about that a little bit. So, all right, let's so we have some things to look forward to in the future. So, by the way, and as far as if you just want to listen, objective, if you think that my channel is worthy of hosting a debate between you and someone else, whoever it may be, whatever the perspective or topic is, feel free to reach out to me. Absolutely. If it's you and another atheist who want to debate whether you can ground ethics objectively within the atheistic or skeptical worldview, sure, send me an email, and that'll be fine. I'd be happy to do that. And I would happy to host debates between theists as well about theological topics and debates within Christianity. So okay. As far as things that were discussed tonight, this was just kind of like a random impromptu stream that was. I was going to be doing something completely different tonight, and then basically it was proposed that there would be a discussion, which I was fine with because it wasn't anything else important to that I was doing. But so we were going to talk about certain things, and then as usual, with these conversations, you never know exactly what's going to happen or how it's going to happen because things can get chaotic. Part of that's my problem, a problem with me being a host and just letting things kind of devolve. But at the same time, on my channel, sometimes I try to whenever you're hosting a channel, you kind of have to make a choice between participation and focus. The more people who are a part of a conversation, usually the less focused it is, and the less deep the analysis will go. When it's just you and another person, you can kind of really hone in on things and just kind of have a back and forth. Whereas with 6 people, everyone's thinking different things and has different points to make about everything that's being said. So it's really hard to focus. But so there's always a trade-off between participation and focus. And we started off a little bit focused, but then we kind of got into a more open panel because I saw that people were hoping to basically make arguments about things that were being said in the conversation. So it's kind of a little bit of both. So hopefully people were okay with that. The biblical contradictions, people have been having these conversations for a long time, especially the one with Genesis and whether the 2 chapters align and things like that. So people can go watch the conversation and see who made the best arguments. Objective ethics, he asked some good questions. Unfortunately, because he was the only one of his persuasion on the panel, he didn't really get to talk a lot during the open panel. And I feel bad about that. But, he asked the question, if you presuppose your worldview, then what's the point of having a conversation? I actually agree with him. If you presuppose the truth of your worldview, which is what the precepts do, then you're basically admitting that you're closing your mind to potential alternatives. You're saying that there's no way I can be wrong. And honestly, I understand where it comes from. It comes from a position of maybe wanting to believe that respecting God and thinking that, wouldn't respect his divine word. Sometimes it comes from a perspective of emotion. I presuppose this because I want it to be true. You don't think of it that way, but it comes from a position of wanting to have that kind of that certainty, that assurance that what you believe is the truth. So you presuppose it. You don't think of it, but you rationalize it in other ways. You say, well, it's true because you can't be true. There's nothing else can be true. I think that the most honest way to go forward is no matter what you believe, you have to entertain the possibility that can be wrong in some way. Now, absolute truth does exist. Like objective truths beyond, human conceptual, our individual perspectives do exist. Reality exists. So I'm not saying no truth exists. What I'm saying is we can't assume that whatever it is we believe about the truth is actually corresponding to that truth. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think no matter what it is you believe, you have to entertain the possibility that given new information, you might be proven wrong. Even something as simple as 2 + 2 = 4. Like, I have a really hard time believing that I'll ever change my mind on that. But if somebody came up to me and said, I have a real good reason for you to think you're wrong, I would listen to that person. Now, I think there's a really small chance that person would really change my mind. And I'd probably end up concluding that person's crazy. But I have to at least consider the possibility that, especially in these difficult philosophical, religious, theological topics, you have to come at it from the perspective that some or maybe even everything you believe is wrong, or your epistemological foundations, or whatever. Because he's right. There are too many times when people get stuck in their way of thinking because of their epistemological presuppositions. And really, the presupposition itself is unjustified. It's true within its own logical framework, but not ultimately true. So everyone must approach everything, whatever it is they believe, from a position that ultimately it could potentially be wrong. So I'll just kind of finish that. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about those. As far as the debate that I'm having, yes. As of this moment, I am scheduled to have a debate on Standing for Truth. Skeptics may not be totally interested in the topic, but the topic is it's about Christian theology. Is justification by faith alone? And that's basically justification is where God declares a person righteous. And faith alone is essentially the idea that you must merely put your faith in Christ, I guess, and you must believe that basically you don't have to do anything as far as actions or behaviors in order to be justified. I think that's clearly wrong. Now, the thing is, even though I'm almost certain that I'm right, there's a chance I'll lose the debate just because the opponent might be rhetorically stronger than I am. So I really think it's going to come down to, can I make the argument in the most effective way? Now, depending on how strong my opponent is at debating, he may be able to throw me off and throw some curveballs at me and make me look bad. Sure, that position is the correct theological position. So I really think it's going to come down to preparing for potential curveballs that might be thrown at me, things like that. But to me, the idea that you can just believe some propositions about things that happened thousands of years ago and God will justify you and declare you a righteous person is absolutely absurd. So just like, what if instead of Jesus Christ, it was Muhammad, about whom you have to believe these things? You have to believe that Muhammad is the final and ultimate prophet. And as long as you believe that, someone who violates women and then eliminates them and throws their body in a swamp and drives away and never repents, you can be someone who steals, lies, cheats, does all the most horrible things. You can be a genocidal maniac. You can literally run a country and eliminate millions of people, which has happened in history, and still go to heaven as long as you affirm the right propositions. This is literally the level of absurdity to which this view will take you if you follow it to its logical. I don't think I'm going to lose the debate on the merits of the position. I think I might lose the debate just simply based on how well one or the other presents the arguments. But I think that I know the arguments well enough that I'll at least make a strong case. Again, it's going to be on the Standing for Truth YouTube channel on November 22nd at 8 p.m. So it's about 2 months out, a little under 2 months. And yeah, I hope people are interested in that. I think it's especially everybody, because I feel like ultimately the Christian idea of salvation is what applies to everyone. So even if you are a skeptic and you don't believe in Christianity right now, maybe you will at some point. So it will be good for you to hear those arguments about what the proper perspective of Christianity actually is. So you don't get fooled into thinking, well, Christianity is so absurd, I can't buy into it. Well, maybe that's because you haven't heard what true Christianity is. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who participated. Thank you everyone who participated in the chat. And until next